Afide and Biba Betnes. This roundtable hearing conducted by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts is called to order at 2:09. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets on February 17th, 2023, with a second notice provided on February 22nd, 2023. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. This morning, the committee is holding this afternoon rather, the committee is holding a roundtable hearing to discuss the Guam Police Department with the following items on the agenda: status of the crystal meth response and strategy, call response times, staffing, recruitment and retention of officers, robberies, status update on crime statistics, equipment and procurement, use of K-9 units at the Port Authority of Guam, police corruption, as well as potential legislation and legislative assistance. I'd like to welcome my colleagues joining us today on the committee. My Vice Chair, Senator Chris Duenas. Thank you. Senator Jesse Lujan, Senator Tom Fisher, and Senator Tello Taitagui. I'd like to also welcome our community partners joining us today from the Guam Police Department. And I'd like to also go over the general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal from a hearing any member of the legislatura in Guam who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 37th Guam Legislature's standing rules. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in the removal from the hearing by the host. And as the chair, I wanted to call today's hearing really, new term, new committee. Check in with the Guam Police Department. I actually got a lot of comments from the public along the vein of we already know what the problems are, but again, I think as the chair with the new term, new committee, it's incumbent upon us, we have a duty and obligation to sit down with the leadership of the Guam Police Department, to include, of course, Chief Steve Ignacio and his administrative and leadership team, and find out how the legislature can assist the Guam Police Department in basically tackling the many challenges that we're facing relative to public safety on our island. And I know it's a Friday afternoon. We're anticipating a lengthy hearing. Definitely very humbled and grateful for the show of support and an attendance from the Guam Police Department. And I guess on that note, we'll just get right into it. Chief Steve Ignacio, I know that you have a PowerPoint presentation to start with. So good afternoon, Chief. And again, I thank you and your team for joining us today.
Having good afternoon. Can you hear me, Malik? Okay. Having good afternoon, Senator and Chairman Chris Barnett, Vice Chair Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Tom Fisher, Senator Sabina Perez, Senator Tello Taitagui, and Senator Jesse Lujan. I am Stephen C. Ignacio, the Chief of the Police, Guam Police Department. I would like to thank each of you for allowing me the opportunity to appear and testify at this roundtable hearing on matters concerning the Guam Police Department. I have here with me members of my team to include my command staff, Major Fred Chargaloff, Captain Tin Santos on behalf of Major Manny Chong, Major Andrew Kirigua, Major Joe Carbolito, Ms. Nelia Sonoma, my Administrative Services Officer, Ms. Anne-Marie Cruz, my Federal Programs Manager, and Ms. Grace Lujan, my Personnel Officer. And also at the table is Ms. Monica Salas, our Chief Criminalist from the Crime Lab. Let me start off with the GPD's mission. GPD's mission is to serve the community of Guam by protecting life and property, preventing crime, enforcing laws, and maintaining order for all citizens. Our core values include professionalism, respect, integrity, dedication, and excellence. As you can see in the organizational chart provided, the Guam Police Department currently has 4 major bureaus. With the addition of the DNA lab and the different duties and responsibilities that came with it, I reorganized to expand and add a new bureau, the Forensic Science Bureau, which was formerly under the Investigations Bureau. The FSB now stands as a bureau of its own. I anticipate another reorganization in the near future to incorporate the soon-to-be-built Eastern Precinct in Talofofo. Currently, GPD employs 344 personnel. Of this total, 284 are uniformed officers and 60 are civilian staff. With respect to staffing, police officers are assigned as follows: 175 in Operations Bureau, 36 in Investigations Bureau, 13 in Forensic Science Bureau, 16 in the Services Bureau, and 15 in the sections under the Chief of Police. These figures do not include the 11 ARPA retirees, 8 police officer trainees, and 21 civilian police reserve. Of the 284 uniform officers, 13 are on military orders and 14 are on extended leave. Today's agenda. I've prepared for you testimony on the following agenda items: the status of crystal meth drugs and the Guam Police Department response and strategy, call response times, staffing as it pertains to recruitment and retention of officers, robberies, status update on crime statistics, equipment and procurement, the use of canines at Port Authority of Guam, investigations into the alleged corruption relative to recent federal court documents, and lastly, areas where GPD seeks potential legislative assistance. On the issues surrounding Guam's drug problems, it is no secret that we have been fighting the meth or ice pandemic on Guam. This is nothing new. We've been combating the effects of illicit drugs, particularly ice, for the past 30 years. It did not happen overnight. In my 30 years of law enforcement experience, I've been a part of or have seen major drug organizations taken down. But just like what happens in the illicit drug dealing world, when you take one organization down, another will pop up. It's almost a cycle, if you will. The Guam Police Department continues to invest and strengthen its strategic partnership with federal and local law enforcement organizations. Over the past few years, 110,000 grams of meth was seized between GPD, the Drug Enforcement Agency, U.S. Postal Service combined. This equates to at least, imagine in your mind, 5 50-pound bags of rice. With respect to our response to fighting this meth epidemic, the Guam Police Department has a special investigation unit whose primary responsibility is the investigation of illegal drug activity on Guam. Furthermore, we have task force officers embedded at the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm, the U.S. Postal Service, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the U.S. Marshals Service, and Homeland Security Investigations. On February 13th, 2023, HSI announced a new border initiative in cooperation with CNMI in Guam to advance border security, known as the Marianas Islands Border Enforcement Safety Task Force, or BEST. With nearly all of our goods arriving by sea and air because of our geographic location, both the CNMI and Guam are considered transit points for illegal activities. This effort unifies both local and federal law enforcement agencies to protect our community. This task force will be vital in drug interdiction missions and combating threats facing our island and the Marianas, and could potentially lead our admission as a high-intensity drug trafficking area, or Haida program. We are now vetting a new officer to be assigned to the HSI to contribute to this mission. What I can say for certain is that GPD has significantly increased the number of arrests for drug offenses year over year. If you refer to figure 5-12 on page 75 in your uniform crime report, which is attached as a part of your packet, GPD's enforcement increased by over 383%. These figures represent arrest of persons who distribute, deal with, and possess drugs. Understanding current drug trends and the fact that Guam law enforcement has recorded the seizure of fentanyl, I have also come before you to testify in support of Bill 10-37, which aims to allow the Guam Police Department to lawfully possess and distribute naloxone or Narcan. GPD call response. It is no secret that the Guam Police Department lacks adequate staffing, especially with uniformed personnel. With the lack of staffing, we do recognize that our response time to calls may not always meet the demands of our community. As the Chief, I have heard and received calls and complaints from members of the community that it is sometimes takes longer than expected for officers to respond to calls for police assistance. Calls for police service are prioritized based on the severity of the crime, the number of available units, and volume of calls. Anything in progress or life-threatening is considered a priority. For example, a fight with a weapon is dispatched before a verbal dispute. When an incoming call is received by the Guam Police Department, precinct field supervisors must manage and prioritize incoming calls from the public requesting assistance and deploy personnel to respond to calls in order of priority. With the continuous recruitment of personnel, specifically uniformed personnel, we anticipate that call response times will significantly decrease with the addition of patrol officers. Staffing. Since the start of this administration in 2019, the Guam Police Department has prioritized the recruitment of police officers and civilians. GPD has had a new police cycle every year, of course, except 2020 during the height of the pandemic. In 2019, we hired 29 police recruits. In 2021, the Guam Police Department led a blended academy to allow for the training of other law enforcement agencies, including the Airport Police, Port Police, Customs, and the Department of Corrections. That cycle included 6 police officers. In 2022, GPD started its newest police cycle with 16 recruits. Currently, GPD received a certification list of 78 prospective candidates. As we go through the initial phase of the process, only 54 of that 78 are moving on to the next phase. The difference of 24 applicants have either not responded, declined, or are on military orders and not available for interview. Some have accepted job offers at other agencies. Some of the more evident challenges with recruitment is the inability for some to pass the written tests, which I've spoken to before. From April 2019 to July 2022, DOA received 1,023 police officer applications. Of the 1,023, 990 were screened and met the requirements to take the test. Of the 990 who met the requirements, only 450 appeared to take the test. Of the 450 that appeared to take the test, 188 passed, 262 failed. So 58% of the interested applicants who showed up for the test failed. As we talk about the challenges of the applicants, information from the Department of Administration revealed that of the 157 applicants who completed the test, only 78 passed, or 49%. As part of its efforts to attract applicants, GPD has held 2 job fairs to date, with a 3rd job and fair anticipated in the next 4 to 6 weeks. GPD has actively reached out to community in an effort to recruit police officers by engaging with students at high schools, the Guam Community College, and the University of Guam. Also, since 2019, GPD's job announcement for police officer trainees remained continuous and is open at all times. Although we have 37 open vacancies, that does not include the 25 vacancies under the FY 2021 COPS hiring grant, the 20 under the FY 23 General Fund, and we also have a projected in our FY 24 budget request for an additional 43 new police officers. That's a total of 125 police officer positions. In addition to our efforts to recruit police officers, we understand and recognize our civilian employees are as critical components to the department. As such, we've hired an administrative officer, services officer, a personnel officer, program coordinators, law enforcement dispatchers, criminalists, and detention facility guards. And we intend to recruit more additional administrative personnel. Hiring is one thing, but retaining employees is a continuous challenge. All of the newly hired detention facility guards have resigned. Of the 3 law enforcement dispatchers we hired, 2 have resigned. In addition, between 2019 to present, GPD has lost 3 additional dispatchers. Most, if not all, have left for higher paying jobs. Robberies. Moving on to the next agenda item on the agenda, robberies. I believe that issues of robberies has come up with the recent spike of armed robberies in the central area over the past couple of weeks. I am pleased to report 1 week ago, the Guam Police Department apprehended and arrested the persons responsible for all 11 of those robberies. I can assure you that GPD is attentive to what's going on in the community. With the recent spike in robberies, we identified a team to actively investigate and pursue these criminals. Thanks to the effort of our patrol officers, Criminal Investigation Division, the Community Crimes Task Force, and the Special Operations Division, we were able to develop information which led to the subsequent arrest. In 2022, GPD arrested 4 other individuals responsible for 23 robberies in the year 2022. As we talk about robberies, I'd like to turn your attention to page 19 of the Uniform Crime Report. Despite the shortage of personnel, the number of robberies has decreased by 55% from 2017 to 2021, as illustrated in the graph. Good, sir? Yeah. Status updates, crime statistics. As we all talk about the next item, you have all received copies of the Guam Police Department's latest Uniform Crime Report for 2021. 2022 Uniform Crime Report is still in the work at this time. It takes a couple of months for us to finish that, sir. If there are any specific questions regarding specific crime disciplines, we can discuss that during questions and answers. Equipment. The global drug problem is increasing, with trafficking of methamphetamine, heroin, and emerging threats like fentanyl impacting communities worldwide. Law enforcement officers need to quickly identify suspected narcotics in the field to help keep drugs and drug dealers off the streets. The Thermo Scientific, or TrueNarc, handheld narcotics analyzer enables officers and other personnel to scan more than 498 suspected controlled substances in a single definitive test. In an effort and response to the opioid epidemic affecting much of the United States, and realizing that such a drug poses a threat to our island, GPD has purchased 4 TrueNarc testing equipment. Recreational boating and safety outreach, safety and search and rescue operations. GPD has purchased a 41-foot boat with funding under its recreational boating safety grant, and intends this year to purchase a 32-foot vessel and 6 jet skis to assist in the recreational boating safety program and the Guam Fire Department search and rescue operations. Equipment for Highway Patrol. With funding support from our partners with the Office of Highway Safety, GPD was able to secure a brand new enclosed trailer and light carts to support Highway Patrol operations. Vehicles. From 2019 to present, GPD has purchased 76 vehicles, 34 of which were used as patrol cars. Funding sources include GPD's General Fund, Department of Interior Compact Impact Fund, CARES Act funding, and recreational boating safety grants. A hyperconvert server was procured with ARPA funds to support operations. This is intended to replace infrastructure consisting of separate servers and storage networks. Drones. GPD currently has 2 drones purchased with funding under the Safe Schools Initiative. We are also working with the Bureau of Statistics and Plans to acquire another drone, and we received another grant which is in progress with funding from GIDA to acquire additional drones. To date, the Guam Police Department has 13 drone operators certified and trained. In 2019, nearly $1 million was given to the Guam Police Department from the governor to fund specialized equipment to outfit the DNA lab in Manila. This was not budgeted for in prior budget requests, nor was it included as part of the bill for the DNA lab. Procurement. In 2022, the Guam Police Department signed a $1.2 million contract with Banyan Networks, which was selected through an RFP to provide consulting services for GPD's radio communication system. This is an important achievement for GPD as we move forward to replace our 30-plus-year-old land mobile radio system, which is antiquated with limited support provided by the manufacturer. It has been over 12 years since the Guam Police Department has attempted to move forward to replace this system. GPD made 2 previous attempts to issue an RFP to obtain consulting services. Body-worn cameras. Currently, for this fiscal year, the Guam Police Department anticipates to expend $200,000 towards the purchase of body-worn cameras from a matching grant received from the United States Department of Justice. As we look forward, some of the major procurement items in GPD expects to procure for this year include $200,000 for body-worn cameras, an additional 4 drones from Haida and Bureau of Statistics and Plans, 20 patrol vehicles under the Tourist Attraction Fund, nearly $700,000 for bulletproof vests, $700,000 to update our IT infrastructure, which is at a minimum over 5 years old, and more specialized equipment to support our Forensic Sciences Bureau, with funding support from the Edward Byrne Grant administered by Bureau of Statistics and Plan. Canines at the Port Authority of Guam. Regarding the use of canine units at the Port Authority of Guam, Guam Police Department does not have primary jurisdiction at the Port Authority. This is a point of entry. The regular use of canines at the port would best be deferred to Guam Customs and Quarantine and the Port Police. In order for GPD to deploy our canine units at the Port Authority, there would have to be probable cause or maybe a search warrant to enter. Regardless, the Guam Police Department will always stand ready to assist in interdiction efforts should we be called upon. Police corruption. GPD takes any allegations of police corruption seriously. In recent weeks, a local news media broke a story of documents unsealed relative to a federal investigation. I have reviewed these documents and read through its contents. With respect to the 2 retired police officers, I understand that there is a lot of concern regarding their potential involvement with known major drug traffickers. Upon further review of the document and in speaking with the lead law enforcement agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, I have been assured that the other officers named in these documents, with respect to that unsealed documents, are not a subject to or a part of any corrupt activities in relation to this investigation. And I did hold a press conference yesterday to discuss this issue. Finally, potential legislative assistance. In discussion with staff, a recent audit was conducted for our recreational boating safety grant program. Recommendations were made by the federal grantor to update Guam's Territorial Boating Act in relation to 10 GCA Chapter 69. The Guam Police Department, within a reasonable time frame, will submit recommendations for potential amendments to the law. This was just a recent audit that was done. Legal counsel. The Guam Police Department requests this body to reconsider providing legislative authorization for us to hire our own in-house legal counsel to improve response time when dealing with administrative matters such as FOIAs, procurement, rules and regulations, and personnel matters, just as we've done so in the past. We will continue to work with our partner agency at the Attorney General's office, such as prosecutors, on criminal matters. OVIS. The OVIS fee has been in effect since 2015. On average, GPD receives an average of $300,000 annually. The Guam Police Department respectfully requests your consideration to increase Guam's safety inspection fee from $15 to $20. Currently, the Guam Police Department receives $3 for every $15 collected. By increasing the safety inspection fee to $20, $8 of the $20 collected will go to the Guam Police Department's Police Patrol Vehicle and Revolving Fund. The nominal increase will help GPD receive more funding under its Police Patrol Vehicle and Revolving Fund and will assist to reflect the current market value of patrol cars. As an example, in 2019, we bought a patrol car for $45,000. A recent price quote in 2022 quoted that same patrol car for $62,000, a 38% increase in market value over the past 3 years, or 2 years. When considering the general pay plan structure as it currently stands, please consider this. Some of my employees earn only $11 an hour. With the cost of living increasing on our island, can anyone really survive on that salary? As I testified earlier, GPD has and continues to struggle with the challenges of recruiting and retaining employees due to pay disparity between DOA's general pay plan and the pay plan of autonomous agencies and the federal government. I recently lost 3 law enforcement dispatchers to the federal government for this reason. We respectfully request your consideration to support the initiative for the 22% pay increase to the general pay plan to support GPD's recruitment and retention. I know it ends there, but let me just add to that what happened today with one of my dispatchers. I had a chance to speak with her because she resigned effective today. And I asked her, I said, where are you going to? What are you doing? She goes, Chief, I'm only earning $13 an hour. I said, and where are you going to? I said, she's going to the Navy's 911 dispatch center as a dispatcher. She will be earning $20.20 an hour. And on top of that, she gets a 12.5% COLA. So if there's any disparity, I think we really need to take a good close look at the general pay plan because I don't think anybody can hold anybody at fault for leaving for something that pays you $8 to $10 more to do the same thing and have less calls, because we all know the Guam Police Department's dispatchers handle the majority of the calls. They don't handle as much calls as we do. So with that, Senators, I am done with my testimony, and I'm open at this time for any questions or concerns you may have.
Thank you so much, Chief. And I think I would also like to recognize Senator Sabina Perez, Senator Joanne Brown, and Senator Roy Canetta. Good afternoon. And I guess we'll just start. Also, I would like to recognize the Chief of Customs, Vincent Perez, is here. Sir, if you'd like to come up to the table, I don't know if you want to jump in the fray, feel free. Because we'll go down the agenda and we'll start with the status of crystal methamphetamine response and strategy. And I did see something that was news to me was, the Chief, you had talked about the establishment of the Mariana Islands Border Enforcement Safety Task Force.
Yes.
BEST. And so if you could just first start by providing maybe more information on that.
Yeah, so it's a recent initiative. So the Guam Homeland Security Office, which is the Homeland Security Investigation, which is a federal law enforcement agency, had applied through their department to establish a BEST, or the Border Enforcement Security Team. And Guam was approved for a BEST program. And so, we're still in the early stages with that. I've been in contact and in discussion with Mr. Robert Ramirez, the lead special agent for HSI here in Guam. And we're vetting an officer right now, and I think he's working with Customs and several of the other law enforcement agencies in Guam to put together a multi-agency law enforcement BEST task force.
Chief Perez, would you have anything to add to this?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, honorable senators. Yes, Guam Customs is also, we've been contacted, and we're looking at trying to facilitate some kind of partnership with the federal government and the local government to help us with the initiatives at the border. So what the chief was alluding to is correct.
Can you explain to us how the establishment of the BEST could lead to our admission as a high-intensity drug trafficking area? Chief, if you could just for our viewers at home and abroad, maybe also provide a little background on exactly what Haida is?
Yeah, so Haida is an acronym that stands for, it's spelled HIDTA. It's a high-intensity drug trafficking area. It's a designation given by the federal government, and what it does is that it has a funding source that provides additional funding to law enforcement agencies and different law enforcement groups throughout the nation to combat specific drug problems within a specific geographic area. So the Guam in general has been pursuing a Haida designation through our discussions and at last conversation with the last Attorney General, outgoing General Camacho. 3 attempts were made. First was done by GPD, that was disapproved. 2 further attempts were made by General Camacho, former General Camacho, to get Haida designation, but they were both again disapproved. Through the suggestion and in discussion with the Haida office, which is out of Hawaii, their concept is probably to have Guam partner with the CNMI to put in a single application to receive Haida designation for the Marianas Islands. What's important with BEST is that in our discussion with Special Agent Ramirez from HSI, using some of the data that we can collect from a BEST task force, that'll help supplement our application to show that we do qualify or that we can qualify for a Haida designation. Again, we've been working very closely with the Haida office in Hawaii, Mr. Gary Yabuda, or Yabuda, who is the director for the Hawaii Haida.
Can you explain, because, when you read the news and just even looking at a lot of the stats and the seizures that are being made at the border and at the post office, it kind of seems like it's a no-brainer. We are a high-intensity drug trafficking area, but why do you think we haven't been able to, in 3 attempts, receive this designation?
I'm not very sure. The applications were submitted by a previous chief and then also by a previous AG. And it's just my basic understanding that I have talking to former General Camacho and talking with some other people that have been involved in the application process. And you got to remember that on Guam and in Hawaii, our problem is very different, significantly different from what they're facing in the United States, right? Their problem is opioid and fentanyl. And that's where their fight is at. And so we're out here in the Pacific, our fight is a little bit different because we're fighting crystal meth or ice. And so, we fall, that's why they're trying to get us to fall under Hawaii, because we have this similar problem with crystal meth.
Chief Perez, did you have anything to add?
Well, I can tell you that in the previous administration, I was part of the working group to try to develop the application for the high-intensity drug trafficking area, and it looked like we submitted a very good application, but at the levels above us that make the decision, we just understood that it didn't go any further. So, obviously, if you ask us if there's any entity out there that would be able to help us in addressing the crime issues, which is also multifaceted with mental health and everything else, and schools, I say yes, let's do it. People on the face of it look at the high-intensity drug trafficking area and they're saying, oh, that designation is a blight for the island of Guam. But really, if you really take a look at it, like in places like Honolulu, Hawaii, they don't really have a problem with their, pre-COVID, which is when the application went in, they didn't really have an issue with visitors or tourism. And so if there's any chance for us to get any type of funding that would help us to at least address it directly through cooperative initiative, then I say let's do it.
Do you think that the establishment of BEST is an escalation towards Haida or an either-or?
Sir, again, like I said, in our discussion with Special Agent Robert Ramirez, and he was also, there was a meeting that occurred last Monday, February 13th, and in that meeting, I believe the Deputy Director for HSI, Mr. Template, I'm not sure if you were there, Chief Vince, but that was one of the things that we got from that meeting, is that this BEST task force helps with the effort to achieve Haida designation. I think, and we think about, our congressman, maybe there might be a help from his office to kind of push our effort to get a Haida designation. And I think what it does really is that it opens up a lot of, really what it is, Haida is just more money to combat drugs. That's really what it is at the end of the day. That's all Haida does, is really, it gives you a lot more resources, gives you a lot more money to buy, equipment, personnel, to fight the drug epidemic in your regions.
Does it also come with information sharing with the federal entities?
We've never participated in Haida. I'd be just guessing at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had any discussion with Attorney General Doug Moylan about a fourth Haida application?
No. Recently, we've just been discussing panhandling, homeless encampments, and there's one more thing I forget. Yeah.
Curfew, right?
Curfew. There you go. Curfew violations.
Chief, in your presentation, you said in your 30 years of law enforcement experience, you've been part of or have seen major drug organizations taken down. But just like what happens in the illicit drug dealing world, when you take one organization down, another will pop up. It's almost a cycle, if you will. So I'd like to ask, how many organizations does the Guam Police Department believe, as much as you can say, are dealing large quantities of crystal methamphetamine on the island?
Current or former?
Current or,
Current?
yeah?
I would say maybe one or two, or yeah, there's a handful. Yeah, not a lot. Major drug organizations that we would label as major drug organizations.
And are you able to elaborate as much as you can about these
Probably,
major drug
yeah.
organizations?
Probably not at a public hearing, sir. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues for questions. I'd like to start with the Vice Chair, Senator Chris Duenas. Senator. Vice.
Mr. Chairman, you had a lot of great questions. I just have a couple here. Chief, I think when we cut to the chase here, and first of all, thank you for all of the members who are here, and with Customs here, we're approaching the multi-agency task force level, so thank you, because I do have one question with regard to that issue. So, Chief, in your presentation, you say a total 284 uniformed officers. Then you go on to state that you have at least 32 that are out for either sick leave or other military obligation. So, in my simple math, that brings us down to 252. Are we saying now that 252 in terms of uniform officers are officer on the beat, officer on the street?
No, so that's total 252. So that's a lot of it, of course, are assigned to patrol operations. So when I talk about extended leave, military leave, I have officers that went on a 3-year deployment with the U.S. Coast Guard, 1-year deployment with the THAAD mission, 6 months deployment to a mission somewhere else, you know. So the military leave really does take its toll on the Guam Police Department. But, you know, unfortunately, those are protected leave, and they you know, when they come in with orders, the most we can do is pretty much acknowledge them and say, thank you very much, and, you know, here you go, take your
So,
leave.
Chief, as I arrive at that number, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last statistic that I heard in terms of it's either the overall police department or even officers, active duty officers, that would be the officer on the street, officer on the beat, should be at a level of around 550 manpower strong. Is that correct?
Well, if you look at a very old study done by the Department of Interior prior to the military buildup, their suggested number was 525, and that's always been kind of the number I've put out in some of my testimony. We've used the number 475 before because that's at a peak back in the 90s. That's where we're at. I'll tell you right now, though, with all the recruitment that we've done over the past 4 years, we actually are operating at a net loss. We're actually -8 when you look at the number of officers who resigned or retired versus the number of officers that we hired. I believe 82, right? 83. We lost 83, hired 74? 75.
And
There's a
Chief,
net loss of officers.
yeah, and Chief, I mean, please, and I think that all of us today will be approaching this situation like this. This is not adversarial. This is just to put
No,
out
absolutely.
the facts, right? And help wherever we can. I mean, even at that then, if we use the 475 number, we're probably barely at 50%.
Yeah,
in
we're barely
terms
at
of-
50%. Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, that herein lies the issue in terms of what people see, what people feel, what the identity. I see many of the officers. I visit with a lot of them, and I know they're doing the best they can. But
Sir,
that's why I like your new number of 125 capability. We just got to figure out how we're going to get there.
how to get there. And I would tell you, sir, you know, I did ask former UOG professor, Dr. John Rivera, you know, tell me what's going on. You know, I asked him to do a study with his students, and you know, it came down to pay at the end of the day. But you know, you look back to prior to the pay increase for law enforcement, my officer was being paid $11.87 an hour, starting pay. It's now increased up to $14 an hour. And then it jumps up to about 16 after 1 year in the job when you go from an automatic promotion from police officer trainee to police officer 1. one of the things that I've discussed with the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, and one of the things I've discussed with my staff is that we used to have an automatic promotion also as well, from a police officer 1 to police officer 2. The reason why I bring that up is because as I look at who I've lost over the years, I'm always losing a lot of police officer 1s. The ones that come in, get the training, go online, look for other jobs, and they get picked up. I lose very few from police officer 2 up the ranks. So I think my strategy in doing my promotions, because we don't have that automatic promotion from police officer 1 to police officer 2, was to increase the number of police officer 2 positions, which is what we're doing right now with the DOA. Is we're doing batches of promotions.
And Chief, I think that makes sense. I mean, that sounds internal to me, right? Because you got to figure out internally what's going on and why you're losing that level. Because I'm just going to bring it up. I mean, it seems like we don't have that problem in fire. And from what I understand from fire is they have a very aggressive training program, and those guys are constantly training. So they're basically increasing their pay. Customs does this and the like by the fact that they're increasing their value. I'm not saying our officers, ones and others, aren't increasing their value, but what's the opportunity? What's the chain?
I think the most attractive thing about the fire department is they get 104 hours regular and 16 hours of overtime pay every payday, right? So I mean, yeah, who doesn't want to join the Guam Fire Department?
Okay, so it sounds like there's a multi-approach to how to look at in terms of recruitment, retention, particularly at the entry level, and so we've got to work on that together because that's all structure budgetary-wise, and it's structure in terms of how the program is established and set up. So,
Yes, sir. But I think, sir, at the end of the day, and we've talked about this at the first round meeting we had at Senator Barnett's office. The problem right now is passing the test.
right.
When you have 1,000 applicants and only 100 plus make it, that's 90% of the people didn't make it. 10% did, and that's always been our problem right now. Since we're talking about recruitment and retention, I can't help but read, every time I open up, online news articles. There was one recently for the Washington Supreme Court Police. They're having a hard time hiring, and they're offering signing bonuses of anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000. So as you look at what can we do to attract people, I don't know. Do we offer bonuses, signing bonuses? Military does it all the time, right? They offer signing bonuses. I know we live in a tough world, where finances are finite, money's finite, but what can we do to attract and recruit people?
Chief, I'd just like to ask, because I know that there were efforts made to address recruitment and retention with the law enforcement raises and the retention pay that was given, but coming before the committee today, it sounds like we're still struggling with those issues. So
We're still struggling with recruitment.
right. So
And it's not so much that there's no effort to recruit, it's just, people aren't passing the test and people just aren't interested maybe in the job.
right. And I wanted to go back to what you said about your dispatcher who was getting paid $13 an hour and left to Navy for 20-some dollars an hour. If we do approve this general pay plan increase, which is 22%, at the end of the day, we're still not going to be competing with entities like the Navy, right?
Absolutely. And it's hard to compete with the federal government, right? Because they're a bigger monster as far as finances. But I think at the end of the day, I think $16, for a dispatcher makes a lot more sense than $13 or even $11. And I have records clerks that make less than $15 an hour. And some of these ladies have worked for the Guam Police Department for over 20 years. 20 years and you're still making $13 an hour.
Right.
Consider that.
And I know when we, before we did the recruitment and the retention, the raises and the retention pay, GPD was, I believe, the lowest paid law enforcement on the island, correct?
No, one of. I think the lower ones were DOC and DYA.
Right. And so by giving everyone the same increase, we didn't do anything to address the disparity between the Guam Police Department and the other law enforcement entities that your officers are leaving for, correct?
Yeah, and I think that's just the way it was applied, right? Who fits the definition of.
Right. And so I'm just wondering here as a legislature, I'm a little disappointed we don't see our appropriations chair, but how much additional of an increase would the Guam Police Department, if we were just to be, our vice chair, oh yes, our vice chair is here. Maybe we could wrangle a commitment out of him. But if we're going to be surgical about this and address the disparity between the Guam Police Department, which you guys are supposed to be our premier, in my opinion, you are our premier law enforcement agency, right? And I think that you should have the pay that's commensurate with that. So if we're going to be surgical and give an increase specifically to Guam Police Department for recruitment and retention, throw out a number. What could we work with? What do you think would be beneficial in helping you not just attract officers, but keep them?
Yeah. So, I try not to say too much because customs is here, but
Sorry, Chief, you're a premier too, don't worry. Don't do premier. Right.
but thank you for saying that because we also feel the same way about that. That the Guam Police Department has primary jurisdiction over the island of Guam, and so at the end of the day, I can safely say that we do more. We respond to more calls. We actually respond to all the calls, except areas where that fall under the jurisdiction of maybe airport police or port police. But I mean, if you look at the volume of calls, the number of cases, the number of arrests, the number of hours worked, I think Guam Police Department does more and puts in more. And so we've always advocated, for a Guam Police Department only pay raise. And I think some of the intentions were there, like with the 40% increase. But at the end of the day, everybody else says we all carry a badge too. We all make arrests, and we respect that. We understand that, but we look at what we do and how much we do versus what others do. And so I advocate, and if you want, we can present you some numbers later on, but because I don't want to just put a number out of the air at this point. But yeah, really, I advocate for a Guam Police Department only pay increase. And I have to do that because I'm the chief. Yes.
So Chief, going back to the general pay plan, I think that there's something we need to understand, right? You are a priority. You're the Guam Police Department. You're on the front line. We're going to have a wide-ranging conversation about that in terms of identifying our priorities currently, especially within the funding schemes that we have. So I think that will be addressed as we go forward. I think there are other priorities, but just narrowing it down now. So we've gone through possibly what we have to do in terms of another study of the structure and the pay as the retention. Going back to the issue of not passing the test, I think we've got to drill down on that, Chief. We've got to work closer with DOA, and it sounds like you're bringing on other specialists within admin to deal with this HR issue. But it seems like in other federal programs and other law enforcement and uniform, especially on the federal side, they have academies that teach the test. And I think it's important now that we really get aggressive about making sure that in Department of Education, we have particularly maybe, I'm going to speak to one charter school next week, that we establish police academies within these schools so that these individuals are already learning and understanding the aptitude to where they got to get to sit a test and pass. Because yes, we may not be able to cultivate that this year, but the next year and the successive years as you're recruiting, we've got to make sure that that pipeline exists.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's something that we can do together. I don't know that we legislate it, but we certainly make sure that there's an effort to create the pipeline.
Yes, sir. And to your point, we actually started a pilot project with Tizan High School, Principal Sophie Duenas. So every Friday, one of our officers goes over there to provide instruction on the concepts of police operations and the police department in general. Not to take anything away from the Guam Community College, but it was mentioned to me by Dr. Maria Cotta that she intends to do exactly what we're talking about here. Somehow embed a police-only, almost like an ROTC program, if you will, in the high schools, or almost like their automotive class.
And I bring up like other charter school too, because like Career Tech Ed, they're training boat captains. That's not an easy test to sit.
Right.
That's even the seat time and the like. You have to have 720 days seat time, and nautical and all the 4 different tests, navigation and like. That is not an easy test to take, and they're successfully getting kids through those programs, at least ready to sit test on a very, very tough federal test. So I think we can, work with the charter schools too. if the GCC is going to, implement the program as a feeder up to their belay and other capabilities of getting it at that level, at least we can make sure that at the charter level, the police academies, almost like a ROTC, academy is established. So I think that's...
And I believe that's the concept moving forward with the GCC. And again, I don't know where Dr. Okada is with that, but I think rest assured that something is coming down very soon.
So I think that the theme that I'm trying to get to here with just my second question, and I'll turn it over to our colleagues, is that, starting off with officer on the beat, officer on the street, making sure that we get that manpower up. The second is, and like I said, it's kind of a joint with customs. I'm having a little trouble with this, and I do understand border border control. But the thing I'm having a little trouble with, especially on the dogs and the Port Authority and the like, Chief, and probably the AG is going to opine on this, is that, yes, the border in terms of what comes in, but once it gets beyond the border, that's cargo.
Right.
Cargo that's going to be dispersed amongst the island of Guam, getting out of there and going in and possibly carrying, drugs. So I really think that whether it's an agreement under an MOU understanding or whatever else it is, Chief, I encourage you to consider that as sort of like the invasive species, how you have joint border. You don't have joint border in terms of the border, in terms of how customs manage the border, but once it's on the interior, because that was the whole idea behind what customs is working on with the inspection x-ray machine and the like, that once those goods are past that dock, they're going to affect us.
Yeah.
Whether they're invasive species,
and the Guam Police
whether it's
Department
drug.
stands ready to assist the customs at any time they call us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Chief, I think that having, you have to interdict as well. And I think that having that dual capability of being able to have that frontline operational situation, because you're going to receive firsthand information. You're going to get information from stuff that's coming in right off the bat that you've got to carry on to enforce going forward. So I hope we can take a look, and I wanted to get Mr. Perez's consideration on that with regard to the dogs and the ability to co-manage in terms internal to the border at the port.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. So the issue with enforcement at the border, right, and the chief of police is spot on in his assessment for law enforcement through the perspective of the Guam Police Department. My contention is that if you're only going to shore up one area without any consideration for the other, you're setting yourself up for failure. So with the collaboration that we have, because we have the same collaborative efforts through federal task forces, we assist GPD, they assist us. We work with federal task forces all the time, and we have people who are permanently assigned to these areas. And we're talking about the acquisition of like TrueNarc drug detection machines and the utilization of drug detector dogs over at the border and everywhere else. Currently, there is an initiative through the Attorney General's office for us to be able to acquire, I think it's well over 16 drug detector dogs, in which Guam Customs is going to be providing training for a majority of it, and it will be apportioned out to several of the law enforcement entities, to include the police department and the Guam Department of Corrections. We need the tools. We need the tools, but when you're absent the tools, you're absent the personnel, you're absent the equipment, the supplies, the training. It's a litany of stuff. And you go back into the early mid-90s, late 80s, the price for methamphetamine at that time was close to $1,000 a gram. Fast forward to today, and the reason why I know this is because back in the 80s, I used to be a drug detector dog handler. I know what it takes to train the dog, to take care of the dog, to make sure that the dog doesn't miss. And so one of the things that people need to understand is that the dogs, like people, have their good days and their bad days. Some dogs will hit on something and some dogs won't. And I'm not going to go into the mechanics or the theory of how dogs learn and stuff like that. All I want to present to you is that I'm here to support the Guam Police Department in its effort to, get more equipment, vehicles, people, supplies, And I also agree that, yes, they do need funding perhaps to address the pay inequities. But if you take a look, Guam Customs is going to say the same thing if we ever have the same type of hearing, and we're going to go through the litany of the same reasons, pretty much the way the chief of police is saying it, and we're going to tell you that we need to be paid at this differential. And so it goes back to, so where does it end? If you take a look at the way the military is structured, you have the United States Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force, right? They don't have any real pay differentials. They have pay grades from E1 through E9 and O1 through O10. Yet, you can say the Marines say that I do the hardest work here. It's all a matter of perspective. Some people say, why work harder, work smarter, join the Air Force? But when you take a look at the pay differential, the pay is the same. There are certain instances when yes, you will have to address certain inequities in the pay structure, but I contend that Guam Customs, like everybody else, is dealing with shortfalls. We operate right now, I think, at 33%. We're 33%. We're at 107 officers. We just recently hired 20-some trainees. We just lost one because they're going to be working for United, and they got a sign-in bonus, so they're leaving us. So what do we do? How do we stem this? I don't know. So, you know, I think that we've come to a point in time where something really needs to be done. We need to come together and identify what it is, where are the shortfalls, how can we utilize technology instead of like, if we have issues with recruitment, maybe amend some of the recruitment, do some interim tabling of requirements, I don't know. The Guam Post Commission right now has recently approved its law enforcement officer force structure, which provides for non-competitive promotions from your lower grade all the way up until you gain all your core competencies for your respective agencies. And what we've actually done is we've created 15 pay grades that start from the bottom, goes up to supervisory and specialized areas, and up to management. So in the bigger picture, there are things that we can do that we have available. But like I said, I'm here to provide support for the Guam Police Department, but also to try and make this good body understand that it's not a one-legged stool. It's a multi-legged stool. And it's not just Guam Customs, the Police Department, DOC. It's everything else to include community support. That's how you raise the village raises the family. It's through community effort.
So, Mr. Chair, I think that maybe when, the dogs come online and a lot of that stuff moves forward, we'll approach that in terms of a multi-agency approach. But certainly understand and respect the presentation put forward on what I think we're going to have. I think we all agree there has to be a higher level of interdiction. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you're going to move along.
Thank you, Vice. And Chief Perez, I did have that sit down with Customs back in the campaign. Seems so long ago. But you guys are 30% staffed. I know that you're also struggling with retention issues, and we do have some ideas. The body has some ideas. They might be a little uncomfortable involving, raising certain types of fees, but I have here, and I just wanted to just tear this out of my binder and share this with you. There's a headline, GPD crippled by shortages. Feds say citizens at risk. This is a news article from 2013, right? And so these are not new issues. And when you take a look around the state of public safety on our island, I mean, it's no wonder if the Department of Corrections is singing the same song that the Chief of Police is singing, that, the Chief of Customs is singing. We're in over our heads, and I think that, the proof is in the pudding your officers, you're doing a great job solving the robberies, but the people of Guam just feel like they're under siege, and I don't know what to tell them. And having you guys here before me, I just ask you, Chief, how do we make ends meet when we don't have the means to do that, when you don't have the personnel? And we'll try and work on the long-term solution, right? It's not going to be an easy fix. But at the end of the day, as a government, we're charged with that obligation, right, to provide a safe island for our people. And I got to say, it's not looking very safe out there. So what would you just say to the people of Guam?
The Guam Police Department is here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you feel you need the Guam Police Department, please call us. And, we're here to serve just like you. And we have an obligation and a duty to serve our community.
And I know with the recruitment and retention, I was able to have a sit-down with Sergeant Paul Tapau of the Guam Police Department's Project U. Now, this is a youth outreach group, and they basically do a lot of work with at-risk, low-income youth in all the different school levels. They're at Hamilani's, they're everywhere, really. And Sergeant Tapau was telling me that you guys are starting a junior police cadet program in the elementary schools. So when we talk about long-term solutions, I know in our sit-down last month, you had said that, for whatever reason, if it's the way police are portrayed in the media, but being a police officer has lost its appeal for a lot of people. And so we need to kind of reinstill that attitude that, we're all stewards of the island. And that's one way you do it is by reaching out to the youth with a message of, prevention and awareness. So how crucial are those programs for you guys as a department?
They're very important, sir. And, we talk about fighting the drug epidemic, but it's not just fighting, getting it off the street, arresting drug dealers. It's preventing people from becoming new users, right? And, prevention, education is a way to prevention. You teach kids, the right and wrong, teach them what to stay away from, and that's why we support our Project U programs. We host the biggest kickball tournament on the island of Guam, and let me tell you, the champions for 3 years in a row, Seal Taitano. Nobody can beat that school yet.
Sin City. I'd like to now recognize my colleague, Senator Tom Fisher. Senator Fisher.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. My name is Tom Fisher. I'm an attorney in the 37th Guam Legislature. I have had the pleasure and the honor of working with GPD, Chief, and Major Carbolito, and I think everybody in the room, over the 30 years that I was practicing in the Superior Court. And my observation from litigating criminal cases with GPD is the juries really like you guys. And I think, Chief, this is a compliment to you and your leadership, and I think that's because when your officers present themselves publicly, it's clear they present themselves with pride. That's important, and I know Major Carbolito, being a former Marine, he will recognize this. When we see the police in the villages, in the communities, your cars, your police vehicles are always spotless, they're always clean, the officers are put together, they've got, the gig line is straight and everything to go, and they just look professional. And that goes a tremendous way towards inspiring trust and confidence in GPD. And another thing is, and here's another compliment to all of your leadership, is those of you with military backgrounds, I'm sure will know this, if you're in a bad command, you can see it because the men and women they just don't look right. They're not wearing their uniform with pride, they're not carrying themselves with pride. But if a sailor or soldier is coming out of a good command, then you can see the difference. These people are carrying themselves with a tremendous amount of pride and professionalism. And let me just say that has been my experience with the Guam Police Department across the board over 30 years. It's always a pleasure to work with GPD, and I really admire your professionalism. I think all of you guys, I know you work long hours and you go well beyond what is expected of civilians in their workplace. So, I don't want it to ring hollow at all. I just want to congratulate you on that. Talking about the canines, I guess this would go to you, Chief Perez. In order to get a dog and its handler trained and on site, how much does that cost?
Well, the price ranges, so it all depends on the training center that you go to. And then on top of that is there are other costs associated for, first and foremost, you got to consider that you're paying for, like if the handler has to go and attend an in-house,
please,
it's the salary.
Roll that into the expense.
Yeah, but I can get that information and present it at a later time. I don't want to throw out a number and I find out it's completely off.
Okay, but I'm going to throw out a number, a vague one, but I'm sure it's many thousands of dollars, is it not? Including the training and the animals and so forth?
You're correct in as far as, in addition to the purchase of the dog and the training, you also have to consider that the maintenance of the dog, the health care, feeding, and all these other logistical things that go into maintaining a live animal,
Yeah.
especially to be used for detection work,
Now,
is
let me-
really quite expensive.
About the maintenance of the animal, who pays for that currently? Are your men and women taking care of it?
For the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, we have them housed at the kennels located on Teton. And at one time, we were looking into the possibility of housing them at home, but the decision was never made to move down that because
Good.
in and by itself, if you move towards that end, there are other impacts that might affect or impact the capability of the detector dog to do its job.
Okay. Well, my concern, and I'm glad to hear what you said, that it isn't happening, I suppose, but my concern would be that the government would tend to shift the burden of taking care of the animals to the handler. You know, they're the ones, the handler's the one buying the kibble and so forth, and that is unfair. Obviously, that's a burden that the people should bear and not the individual officers. I was asking about the canine units because it sounds like such an easy thing to do. You know, just get a dog and say, go get it, Fido, but that's not it at all. You know. So, you know, as we fight crystal methamphetamine, I think dogs are integral to this war, and it's not a place I think where we should be penny wise and pound foolish. I think we should pay for it. I wanted to ask the chief some questions about crystal methamphetamine. You said that the drug arrests have increased by 383%. I think that that's an increase based on, I don't know what, yeah. Would that be a 383% increase over, say, the year 2017, or what's the baseline here?
It's based on that chart that's provided in the Uniform Crime Report.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to that chart. What page is that?
What's the page?
Page 79 of the Uniform Crime Report.
79? Okay, well, I don't want to, you know, get hung up on that, but my main question, Chief, is to what do you attribute this huge rise in drug arrests?
Enforcement,
Enforcement?
going out and actively looking for people that are drug dealers, drug possessors, or, you know, and most of it comes from just a regular old traffic stop, right? Expired license plate, defective headlights, broken tail lights, just normal things that police officers do during the course of their work.
Okay. And these drug arrests, is it fair to assume that the majority is crystal methamphetamine?
Yes, sir. I would say safely 90 to 95% of
Okay.
the arrests are possession of controlled substance,
Do you think
methamphetamine.
Do you think that's also a reflection of an increase in the amount of meth coming into the island?
Well, as you can see through the numbers, we've seized close to 250 pounds of meth. So apparently, there's a lot of meth coming in, but there's also a lot of meth that we're seizing. And I think that the numbers, speak for itself. I mean, there's a lot that we're catching at the borders. And I think really, Chief Perez and I know that, there's recently been a new task force that we formed together with the U.S. Postal Service, because we know that that's where one of our borders is, and that's where we suspect a lot of drugs coming in, and the numbers speak for themselves. The number of interdictions at the U.S. Postal Service is astounding.
Okay.
Just U.S. Postal Service alone, 84,000 grams of ice.
Yeah, and it looks like GPD seized an additional 24,000.
Yes,
If
separately,
my-
yeah.
if
But
my-
I mean,
yeah.
the customs is just Guam Customs, GPD, and U.S. Postal Service. And we've done a lot to put a big dent, if you will, in the amount of meth seized.
Is the drug being manufactured here on island?
I'm not tracking anything that's being manufactured here. It's usually imported.
Has it? Do you have any evidence or reason to believe that it has been manufactured on Guam in the past?
I believe back early on during the ice epidemic, we were coming across what they call clandestine labs or clan labs.
Okay.
And we actually went through a series of trainings and awareness for our officers. But in my 4 years as chief, I haven't heard of any meth labs on the island.
Okay. You said during the pandemic. Do you agree or epidemic? Do you agree that the ICE epidemic is continuing?
Well, it seems that it's carried on for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if we've solved the problem, it would have gone away. But unfortunately, it continues to persist.
I've said publicly in a couple of forums that we have lost the war on ICE. Do you think I'm wrong or right?
I don't think we've lost the war on ICE.
Okay.
If we're still fighting, then we haven't lost the war yet.
Okay. So we're still on our feet.
We're still fighting.
How are we doing?
How are we doing?
Yeah.
We're doing 250 pounds seized good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You mentioned briefly fentanyl. That fentanyl seems to be a substance that is perhaps becoming or will become prevalent on Guam. Is that fair?
No, I think it's fair to say that we know of the presence of fentanyl, and usually because when it hits Hawaii, we kind of anticipate that it's going to make its way to Guam because that's usually the transshipment points. West Coast to Hawaii, Hawaii to Guam, and I said publicly at Bill 10-37 hearing, we have at least 2 recorded fentanyl seizures. We have at least a couple of cases involving fentanyl overdose. Thankfully, nobody died. But, as we said, we're not going to sit down and wait for it to come and then figure out what we're going to do. We continue to work to make sure we protect our borders from the fentanyl coming in, and then also preparing, should it actually make it out into our community, preparing to deal with the effects that it may have in our community. And that's the Narcan that we're trying to get out to the officers.
Okay. You mentioned Hawaii. Do you have any sense of what the effect of fentanyl has been in the island of Hawaii?
No, I haven't heard any stories yet. I think it's safe to say that we've seen the effects in the United States. I mean, I think I was just reading another story a couple of days ago in New York City. Is the chief medical examiner's story in New York City about how fentanyl deaths are just so commonplace now in New York City. Come in Monday and he's going to have at least 30 dead bodies from fentanyl overdose, and it's come like its own separate issue that he has to deal with as a chief medical examiner.
Well, a lot of people listening, some people listening may not be familiar with fentanyl. It is a synthetic opiate.
It's a synthetic opioid. It's a synthetic painkiller, yes.
Is it dangerous?
Absolutely dangerous.
Is it potentially lethal?
Very lethal, yes.
Okay. There is pending here in the legislature, a bill was filed to increase sentencing penalties under certain circumstances for the transfer of fentanyl. If you transfer it to a juvenile under this submitted bill, you could get 20 years. And if serious bodily injury results as a result of the transfer or death, the person who is responsible for that could get life in prison. Do you have any comment on that, those penalties?
Considering how deadly and how lethal fentanyl is, I would support any bill like that would, increase the penalties, because, you can't reverse death, unfortunately.
And I've got more questions for you, sir, but I would open that up to the panel with the uniformed officers here. I'll start with Major Kitagawa. Do you support increased punishment for fentanyl?
Yeah, so as far as data is concerned for fentanyl, because I've had the opportunity to teach the subject at GCC, we know that since 2017, overdoses in the United States have surpassed deaths by traffic accident or deaths because of unintentional injury, right? So we know that that has been an issue for over 5 years in the mainland United States. And we are very fortunate that that hasn't hit with that same impact here on the island. So I know that penalties that would get the attention of those people who are distributing, if that's what it takes, then definitely do support any kind of preventive measures that, you know, would tell somebody not to handle it at all.
Okay. Thank you. And Major Carbolito, do you have a comment?
Of course, I support legislation that would, make the penalties stiffer for any type of drugs, most especially fentanyl, because of the deadly, the effect that it poses on human beings. You know, it being deadly other drugs are, they act differently, but this drug itself, and we need to posture for something like this because it's here. We just don't know how much of it is here. And we need to posture and make sure that we do, prevent it from...
Okay. Thank you, sir. And Major Chargaloff?
Good afternoon, everyone. As Major Carbolito, Major Kidego, and also the Chief, it's definitely needed. And I can say this because fentanyl is not just one of like the other, illegal drugs or even opioids that are out there. It's shown, it's killed thousands of people. And it's not like any specific age range. We've had children, infants who have died from it, right up to people in their 60s and 70s. And like Major Carbolito was mentioning, we need to get ahead of the game. We need to be proactive. So this law would be a very proactive approach to let the people out there know that if you intend to peddle in fentanyl, you're going to get a pretty much a 20-year sentence. And if we do that, and there's still going to be people that are going to do it, they're going to take their chances. But the minute somebody gets a 20-year sentence, rest assured, the others are going to say, I don't know, maybe this is not the thing to do. And it is because in my 30-plus years, this is the worst drug that could happen to come to anybody's shores, let alone our island. Our island is too small. We should not let that allow it to get here because it's already here. We should not allow it to have a pandemic like meth. So I implore each and every one of you and your fellow senators here to, yes, pass the bill because it's going to save our people's lives. And as a law enforcement officer, that's our primary duty. And you also have an obligation, right, to make sure that our society is safe. So yes, can't emphasize it enough. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I won't speak for the other senators on how they feel about that specific bill, but I can assure you that every senator in this legislature wants to see fentanyl crushed, and I'm sure everybody in this legislature is willing to do the heavy lifting to make that happen. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump around a little bit. This HIDTA designation, what are the particular benefits of it?
In my basic understanding, a lot of it is really funding. So Haida has a funding source.
Okay.
That when you receive designation as a high-intensity drug trafficking area, you receive a lot of financial support to go towards your drug investigations into drug trafficking organizations and drug trafficking offenses.
Okay, so money?
Absolutely, a lot of money, a lot of equipment, or money to buy equipment. And I believe sometimes it may even fund more personnel towards the fight.
Okay, all right.
Senator, can I just speak to that? Yeah, Major Chargo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so just to segue into what the Chief was mentioning, because when I was up at Homeland, it covers all aspects of drug interdiction. That's training, that's equipment, and personnel. So at the end of the day, it's a good designation because, and it's strictly funding for anything related to drug interdiction. So that's the goal behind it. So if we can get that, that would help in that fight against fentanyl.
Okay, is there anything that we in the legislature can do to help you on this issue?
It's just the application process. We have to wait for the application window to open.
Okay.
We get together and collectively submit one application, and that gets reviewed by the Haida office in DC. And I think when we get to that point, again, former General Camacho is no longer there. We'd have to sit down, all the law enforcement agencies have to get together and meet. And then, understanding this concept that they want us to go in with CNMI, we're going to have to go over to CNMI, or they're going to have to come to us, or we have to get on a call and say, who's going to take the point, who's going to do the write-up, who's going to submit the paperwork, and collecting all the data that's necessary to support our application.
Okay. When does the window open again?
Ooh, I'm not sure. Not
Okay.
sure.
Is it a yearly thing or just,
Is it? Do you know if Haida's yearly? Is it Haida yearly? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think it's yearly, because I know we tried 1 year, and then a couple years later, so maybe every 2-year cycle.
Okay.
But, don't quote me on that.
Okay. Another issue, completely different. The chair here and I, we visited the Attorney General, I don't know, a couple, 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about crystal methamphetamine and what can be done about it. We touched a little bit on this phenomenon of money laundering. I think that some of the I know that some of these drug organizations that the chair was speaking about, they're sitting on a mound of cash. They got to do something with it, and they're starting to plow it through what appears to be legitimate businesses on Guam. I think that's pretty well known. Are you aware of the Attorney General making any attempts to stop or intervene in these organizations that are laundering money?
I have not had the discussion with them specifically to money laundering.
How about now the Department of Revenue and Taxation? They have a key role in this. I mean, everybody knows that's how Al Capone finally was collared. Obviously, they've got millions of dollars flowing through their coffers. None of it is getting taxed. All of it is being plowed into the economy without a report, origin, or ultimate disposition. I guess my point here on this one is we do have one tool about money laundering that I hope that you or your people could have discussions with the Department of Revenue and Taxation on the enforcement of tax laws against these dealers of the poison. I hope you could do that, Rev and Tax and the Attorney General's office. And then another issue that we spoke about was seizure property. And it would seem like if you bust somebody driving in the middle of the night and they've got an ice pipe and a gun or whatever under the front seat, that GPD would be well within their rights to seize that vehicle as an instrumentality of a criminal act. But this is the nuts and bolts. If you do seize a vehicle, where are you going to lay it down? Do you have lay down space?
No, sir. We do not have an authorized, licensed impound lot.
Okay. And there is no impound lot?
Unfortunately, we're just using whatever facilities we're either leasing or own.
Okay.
But it's not a licensed impound lot, and we just use it because it's termed evidence.
All right.
But I'll tell you my experience when I came in as chief in 2019, right across the United hangar,
Yeah.
it was our impound lot. And, I had to clear that lot out because, I may be sitting on an aquifer, I may be violating all kinds of EPA laws, rules and regulations because it was not a licensed lot. And so one of the things I did was clear out that lot. It was 67 cars, cost me a couple tens of thousands of dollars to clear. And some of those cars have been sitting there for over 10 years.
And
And let me tell you, behind the airport maintenance section building,
yeah.
there are cars there that there's a Ford Bronco that we confiscated or seized in a homicide investigation from the 90s. It started out as a Ford Bronco. It's now a pallet of rust.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the challenges, that when we talk about seizing a car because it had an ice pipe, seizing a car because it had a fraudulent plate, really there are other challenges associated with it. And, it's probably a discussion for a later date because, we can go all over the place. It's the same thing we're talking about with abandoned vehicles, with the
Okay.
mayors, yeah.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. We're going to do another round of questions for the committee members. But you did ask about fentanyl and the fentanyl situation in Hawaii, and we're very fortunate to be briefed by HSI in this very room, and HSI relayed to us that the situation in Hawaii with the fentanyl is quickly surpassing the meth epidemic, and that they now have Narcan widely available in elementary schools. Yeah. Right, so I know that fentanyl's here, but and it's relatively new, but when you read a lot of the drug report data for Guam, they all say that meth is the drug of choice on Guam. So is it your estimation that even though fentanyl is here and may be available, that majority, it's obvious, right? So many of our drug users prefer meth over fentanyl?
Yes, that's what they're addicted to now, yes. And I believe fentanyl is not widely available yet.
Well, thank God for that, right?
Thank God for that, and that's why we continue to fight.
I'd like to recognize Senator Jesse Lujan, and also I'd like to recognize our minority leader, Senator Frank Blas Jr. Good morning, Senator, or good afternoon. Senator Lujan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you and all in uniform for the service you provide for us. I know a couple bad apples don't make you all, so thank you very much for your services to the community, despite the challenges that you guys face, or men and women face on a daily basis. So thank you again very much for that. I know this is not an airport or customs hearing, but I need to respond to Chief Paris in regards to the challenges you have up there. We had met prior to our inauguration, and we're looking at entities because, Mr. Chairman, this is something that we seriously need to look at, because it's customs is a required entity in the airport, and yet they're paying rent. It's required they're required to be there, and every time a bond is taken out or refinance a bond, they'll always be paying rent forever and ever. So it's an entity we need to look at to make sure that we relieve them of some of these, because the monies that are expended annually on rent to the airport is something that can go into your operations and recruitment and retention of your men and women. So it go a long ways. And again, it's the only situation where it's a required entity or government agency is having to pay for for a required housing. So it's kind of like, for lack of a better term, ass backwards. So anyway, that being said, but definitely we got to carve you, because every time we look at something, let's say they're refinancing the bond again, you guys will be paying again, all the time, and it's always included. We can't carve them out because it's part of the bond covenant, part of the covenant. But whenever there's need for enhancing the airport and all that, they go in the bond market, and so you'll be paying forever. It'll never stop, basically. So anyway, but thank you for bringing it up. So hopefully this is one of the things that this legislature will look at and help carve that out, or put a sunset clause on that, so we can see a better future for customs and quarantine over there. But again, back to Chief Ignacio. Chief, you talked about the unified pay plan, right? And the implementation of that be implemented. Wouldn't that kind of bring us back to again the first stage of things, because that will give all law enforcement equal pay, and so you'll still be pilfered by other entities in regards to your law enforcement folks, because of again, people may want to go to maybe less stressful agencies, law enforcement agencies regarding that. So it wouldn't. Yes, that we're making more money, but it will still equalize with everybody else. So it won't raise you a lot higher than the other law enforcement agencies, right?
Right, yeah. And that's what happened with the 40% many years ago.
Yeah.
That's what happened with the recent law enforcement pay plan.
Sure.
Just everybody across the
Yeah.
board. And
So it doesn't help. It helps in the in retainment, but really not in the pilferage of your
Yeah,
your folks.
It helps in retention across the board for
yeah,
all
yeah,
law enforcement agencies.
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Now, in regards to recruitment, again, thank God we're not here. The people here in Guam are not for defunding the police department, but there are other entities, there are other communities back in the United States that are of course wanting to defund their police agencies. That being said, a lot of them have resigned in masses. Are there? What are your capabilities in recruiting such folks? I mean, teachers have done it in the past. Would you be able to recruit from off island for these entities that again whose communities do not where the police agencies men and women are resigning in masses because their communities really are not embracing the police department, and we embrace our police department. I mean, would that help, or has there any inquiries, or what is the what is your latitude in that kind of recruitment?
Thank you for that question. So, I'm trying to remember where I had that conversation recently. I said, we don't use a lot of this when we're doing recruitment. In order for you to know if there's a government of Guam job, you have to go to a website, or you have to know about it. Somebody told you about it, and you have to go in and turn in an application, or maybe even turn it online. But I said, how many times have we advertised on Instagram to a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old that there's job openings in the Guam Police Department? We haven't reached that level yet. I said, the federal government has a USA Jobs, right? It's a federal website where you can find any and all federal good jobs, whether it's law enforcement, clerical support, whatever. We haven't really harnessed technology to use for our recruitment efforts. So all the recruitment that we're doing is just pretty much maybe local. And even at that, the word is not getting out because, that's why we hold job fairs. That's why we hold outreach at the colleges and the high schools. But, really, kind of reminded me of my being a member of the Postmortem Commission when we were searching for a medical examiner. Well, you're not going to find a medical examiner in Guam to apply for the position, so where do we go, right? We go to the National Association of Medical Examiners. They have a website. They have that's where they published our job opening.
Sure.
And that's how we were fortunate to hire Dr. Jeffrey Nine for Guam.
Yeah.
So we haven't come to that stage yet where how do we recruit the police officer from Washington State
Sure.
to know about a job in Guam? But at the same token, sir, would he be really interested in a $14 an hour job?
Well, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I guess with something like with a situation like that, I don't know. From the stories I've read, they're just wanting to get out of the police force. Some of them, of course, go to other jurisdictions to work in law enforcement over there. But some of them are just giving up in the sense, hey, man, they don't want us. They don't want us, and maybe they don't want us. We can recruit them because we want you.
We're competing with the rest of the United States.
Sure, absolutely.
I was in a FBI training last year, and I was in a room with 50 chiefs and sheriffs from throughout the United States.
Yeah.
Number one topic we talked about, day one,
Sure.
recruitment and retention.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: if you were to recruit an officer who's been an officer in a previous jurisdiction, would they start off as well as an officer one?
We'd have to look at their qualifications because you got to remember we have the Guam Police Department's Enabling Act, which requires you to go to certain things, but then we also have the requirements of the Post Commission. So we have to look at that. Unfortunately, maybe that's something we can look at later on. Is I know with some of the nurses, we do reciprocity agreements with some of these states for nurses. Maybe we can look at Hawaii's training program, right? Maybe we can attract an retired or former HPD officer. But nobody wants to come in and start from scratch.
No, absolutely. Sure.
And so maybe we can look at some reciprocity agreements between states and jurisdictions.
Great. And thank you for mentioning in regards to we haven't come to the technology age in the sense of recruitment. We just heard a bill yesterday, actually one of my bills, in regards to all RFPs and IFBs to be in one central, to be able to be housed in one central location out of the Office of Office Technology. And this is something, again, that, Mr. Chairman, maybe you look at in regards to something like that. The Office of Technology take this on as well in regards to a central place for all Gulf Guam, I guess, available jobs and things of that nature. Yeah, because I'm doing the same thing. I got another bill for DOE in regards to all their health inspections and things like that will be housed and not only in their website but also in the Office of Technology. And you're right in regards to one central place to go, and you click it, job openings, click it, RFPs and things of that nature. So, but thank you very much for that, and admitting that we haven't come of age in that situation. One other thing, let me ask you. And the reason why I'm going to ask you this is because I've asked this question before and wasn't answered. Not by you, had nothing to do with you, but where are we at in regards to police headquarters? Because right now you're renting, right? You're renting from the airport, from ITC and Tocopatan, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So where are we at in regards to your own house, basically?
So, unfortunately, we've been building police precincts because we get funding from GORA.
Yes.
I think there was many years ago a study to build a police headquarters, but that study is probably during Chief Scambelluri's time, so it's seriously outdated.
Yeah.
There is a law, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there are actually supposed to be like a multi-law enforcement agency headquarters.
Okay.
I think Guam Fire, Guam Customs, Guam Police,
Okay.
and the Aegis Office are supposed to be part of that law that was passed. I'll dig it up and
the
share
reason, Chief, and the reason why I'm asking is this, because a couple of weeks ago we had a roundtable here with Gita in regards to the new medical center that's going to be open, and one of my questions was, okay, so you're building this monstrosity of a health center, and you're going to house GMH, behavioral health, veterans, and there's one more. Public health, yeah. And so my question was, okay, so we do this. How do we offset that cost? And what are we going to do with these buildings that are going to be vacated then? I mean, do they have other plans for, and you guys need a house? And I don't know if any of these locations are fit for your needs. I mean, they'll definitely need to be refurbished and all that for your needs. But I'm just wondering if there's any of this type of discussion going on, because again, yes, we're very good in building, and there's nobody better building anything than us, but we can't maintain them. But what do we do when we go somewhere else? Because you guys are leasing right now. One of the same things is we can give you your own home. You won't have to lease anymore.
I think everybody here at this table, sir, in uniform, and even some are civilians, we sometimes dream of that day to have our own headquarters.
And that's why I'm saying, because I'm asking, what are you going to do with these buildings that will be vacated?
Yeah, I don't know what the plans are for
Okay,
those things.
so you haven't had those discussions,
No,
right?
I don't know
Okay.
what they're doing with GMH or public health. or
And I'm
whatever.
hoping we will, because we want to know, if it's going to be sold, it could offset that big price that may happen. But from what I was told from Gita had said that they're going to refurbish it for reuse. Well, okay, for reuse for other government agencies, which is great if it is. And okay, which ones? Because you're one of the entities that definitely need your own home. Like I said, I don't know of any of these buildings that will then will be vacated, will be conducive to your needs. But if they are, you should have first dibs in one of them. And I think there are a couple of buildings there that if it's conducive for the needs, it could house multi-public safety agencies in there. So I'm just wondering, but we don't seem to have an answer. We have an answer for building a monstrosity, but we don't know what's going to happen with the other buildings. And
Yes, sir.
that concerns me. But no, it's not towards you, but I'm just wondering if you, again, had those conversations and they were, looking at that. One other thing, Mr. Chairman, how much money or what programs or equipment do you get from monies collected from, say, citations that go to the judicial building fund?
So if I'm not mistaken, the only citation where we collect the fees from is the disabled parking citation.
So
And we split that 50-50 with the DICIT.
Okay, so you don't get any funding at all from the judicial, for monies collected from citation, or anything at all from the judiciary?
So if you're asking if we issue a speeding ticket, no, we don't get any proceeds from a speeding ticket fine. The only other funding that we get from the Superior Court or the Guam courts is the Judicial Building Fund. We get money annually to support the maintenance of the crime lab in Manila. It's anywhere, generally it's been $50,000 annually for the past several years. It used to be 100, but we've never been able to expend it, and that's why it was reduced to 50. So at $50,000 though, what we've done is we've kind of worked out an agreement where, because we've always had the problem with procurement, right? Because we'd handle the money, the 50,000, and sometimes procurement was such a challenge. So we've entered into an agreement now where the Guam courts would use whatever proceeds that they give us annually, and they would take care of the procuring and the maintenance of our buildings. So I think it's a win-win for us. Recently, we received an additional, I think, $250,000 or around that, because they refinance a loan or something, and some of the proceeds of that, a certain portion, also gets diverted to the judicial. I mean the maintenance for the crime lab.
Okay. In other jurisdictions, do monies paid for fines or citations and that, but from their respective police departments, are they funneled back into the police department?
Yes, I'm aware of. I cannot say specifically which jurisdiction, but there are quite a few jurisdictions that do share the citation fees. I think the argument sometimes is, well, that'll just that'll just make police officers go out and give more tickets so they can get more money.
That's my next question, because that's on the argument in regards to that, is that it gives them incentives now to
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So the incentive wouldn't
And
be.
for me, it says, yeah, that gives me incentive to do that,
Right.
to enforce it even more.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, so in total annual funding then that you get from that is how much then? In regards to maintenance and programs and all?
For right now, we get $50,000.
50,000?
50 from
50,
the court.
okay.
But because they just refinanced a loan or something, they give us an additional 200-some thousand.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And so we're using it to make some improvements at the lab.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. Senator Tello Taitigui, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for having this roundtable, something that's definitely going to be needed, kind of precursor before we get to the budget, to hear your concerns. Much of this will be, and by the way, Chief, great presentation. Thank you so much. I'll be keeping this close by as we review the budget. Most of this stuff will probably be in there to justify the means, right? I was, first, thank you, of course, for your service. Greatly appreciate all the hard work and taking the time away from your family to protect all the families on Guam. So greatly appreciate the work that the police department has been doing. I do have a question with regards to the COBANs. The status of the COBANs, considering, they were put around the island so that we could improve the response time to emergencies within the villages. So what is the status with your COBANs?
Sure. So, let me see. The Coban across the former Sheraton, that was actually sits on private property. So that's why there's a fence around it. When the lease expired with Sheraton, Sheraton was leasing the parking lot, leasing that property as a parking lot. And when that lease expired, they didn't renew it. And so the landowners came in and took over the Coban.
Are you going to still continue to use that, or
I cannot use it as private property. Yeah, it sits on private property. I'm not sure what the agreement was back then, and how that building, the Coban, got built on Sheraton's property, private property. Sheraton was leasing. I wasn't around during that time.
Okay.
The next Coban down in Tumon, we still actively use that.
Okay.
for our beach patrol, and so that's still being used. Barrigada was turned over to the mayor, who now uses it, gave it over to the Purple Heart Veterans Organization. Same thing with Mangilaw. The other two would be Jotnya and Talafofu.
Are they up and running?
We still own those. They're still under our inventory.
Yeah.
But, again, unfortunately, because we don't have staff, we can't house officers at the Cobans. The other one is Chalampago. I believe that one is through an MOU, existing MOU from many years ago. I believe one of the nonprofit is using it as a storage facility.
Wow. So how many Cobans are there that are not being utilized and that are being utilized for the police department?
One is being utilized as the one in Tuban by Matapang Beach.
Right.
That's our
How
beach
many do you
patrol
have
unit.
total?
4 right now. Jotnya, Chalampago.
No, even the ones that are not being used but used for storage and
Yeah,
some like,
Chalampago storage, Jotnya is unused, Talafofu is unused. So only 3. Matapang is being used. Sheraton was lost to private,
right.
to the owner, and then Mangilaw and Barrigada were turned over to their respective mayors.
those were put in place for a reason, and a lot had to do with just response time, and also a lot had to do with just having the presence of police officers in the village, knowing that they can just, either if they can't get through on a phone, they can just drive right there instead of having drive all the way to, Aganya or Hagatnya or in Haga to drive, so Chief, I asked that if you please look into this. I mean, there was a reason why they were put there, in the first place. So I know it's, what you have 284 police officers currently, right? And the amount that you're looking at total is how much? The amount, about 400?
Oh, how much do we need?
Yeah, how many do you need?
Again, we use the number 525.
Okay.
We'd like to be there.
Now, a lot of these numbers are based on population, correct? I
Yeah,
mean, we
based on
looked at-
population and a study done by Department of
Yeah.
Interior prior to the military buildup.
Are you still basing this on the 170,000 population on Guam, or is it the latest one that's, I hear it's only 155,000 now?
Yeah, that was based on the population then during the study.
Which-
I didn't commission that study. I'm not sure who did the study, but it was done. And, I think it was a pretty good study. I think the comparison was Guam to Maui.
Yeah, I saw that. That was in 2013. I believe the chairman gave us a copy of that.
Right.
So I think there was 155, maybe, I think it was, Mr. Chair, on your information. So please look into that, the Cobines. I mean, the presence of, someone calls up the police department, someone's breaking into my house, it's in the middle of the night, yeah, this is it. The faster you can get there, the better,
Yes.
One, to apprehend the person, and 2, to save the one that's, the victim, from any harm or the family harm.
Yes,
So-
ma'am. And it comes down at the end of the day, it comes down to staffing. We just need to have the officers because we're to open up a Coban that will require us to have a police officer, at least as a dispatcher, as well as somebody to be there because, like you said, the Coban's just sitting there. Nobody can come there. It's closed.
Can I just add to that?
Sure,
Senator?
sure, Major.
When those Cobans were being built, and that's during the late Chief Scambluri, and they did it because the staffing levels were up there. And at that point, we're up to 480 officers. So at that point, we were able to staff it because numbers were there. And unfortunately, over the years, we've not been able to get up to those numbers. And a couple of things have happened since then, right? So we've had 40 officers back in the 90s, and population has increased, businesses have increased, and our officers have not, the department has not been able to reach those levels again. So again, like the chief was mentioning, it's, it's a staffing pattern, and just like everything else that we do, right, we have to prioritize.
Well,
So-
I mean, if you utilize your staff to its greatest not capacity, but its efforts toward protecting our island, I mean,
Yes.
you would think that the cobines that are meant to be, speed up response time, in these villages are really, really actually needed.
Yes.
And it goes a lot further having them there in the village to respond than anything else. So I ask that you revisit this and try and make the numbers work and see what you need from us to make that work too, Chief, because I know
Yes.
you're going to need, I know it, we can keep saying it has to do with us, recruiting people to become police officers. And that's my next question with regards to what efforts have you made to help GCC, University of Guam, or all those who were not able to pass the test, or those who are interested in taking it to do a class or try to help them before they even take the test, which makes them fail. So, it's like pre-training or, pre-assistance.
Yeah. So,
What have you guys done to help that out?
that's what we were talking about earlier with
Yeah.
the effort by Dr. Okada. And
Right.
again, of course, we'll probably be meeting with her to talk about how do we embed the Guam Police Department in a full-time police track program, just like they have a culinary track, an automotive track.
Right.
It'll be a police track program to get these people interested in the police profession or the law enforcement profession and get them ready to take that test to move on to the next phase. But the challenge is not just for the Guam Police Department. Before Senator Francis Santos stepped down as the superintendent of DOE, I told him, I said, man, what can be done, because the students are not passing the entrance exam at DOA for police officers. And he goes, man, that's something we're trying to work on, because it wasn't just unique to the Guam Police Department. He was actually being approached by the military recruiters because they couldn't even pass the ASVAB to get into the military. I'm not sure what the score is that you need for some of the lower fields of military, but I mean, they were saying the same thing. They couldn't get into the military because they just scored very poorly on the ASVAB.
Yeah, education on Guam is failing us. It really is. With regards to how many individuals are participating in the GPD's reserve program at this point, and does the agency have the supplies and the equipment needed to support these reservists?
Yes, so the reservists received a monthly stipend now of $500.
Right.
That's one of the first things that I did when I became chief, is that we worked with the late Senator Pito to increase the stipend from $250 to $500. So we kind of doubled it.
Right.
And that $250 stipend was there for decades.
Right.
And so we're able to change it. But with the $500 by statute, it reads that it's supposed to fund their equipment and
Right.
their uniforms and stuff. We have 21 reservists that are actively coming to work and actively participating. There's 60 on the list, but only 21 show up. Yeah.
Oh, okay, 60 on the list. Of that, can you give me the status of the CAPE program?
The CAPE program actually started out of a grant through the Guam Homeland Security, and one of the former officers that was assigned, it kind of morphed into a community-assisted policing effort, which is what CAPE stands for. And so these guys would go out and help at big events, just have presence there. What happened though is that a lot of the CAPE volunteers were transitioned over into the CVPR program. There was no follow-up or follow-through with the CAPE program, so the program is kind of defunct. I don't have any other information. I haven't pursued re-implementing the CAPE program yet.
Okay. Congratulations on apprehending the individual on those robberies. Good
Thank
job. 11 that committed, and keep up the good work on that. I'm sure you are keeping up on the good work, but I just wanted to commend you,
Yes,
the
and
police
then,
department, for that.
Kudos to all our hardworking officers for making sure
Absolutely.
that we apprehended those people, so thank you to them.
Absolutely. Now, with regards to it's kind of a segue into police corruption now. Bad segue, right? Yeah, is there such a thing? That's right. In the investigation in corruption related to the federal court documents, what status of the Guam Community Police Review Commission? What's the status of them?
I haven't pursued the Guam Police Review Commission. Many chiefs, even the prior chief before me, tried to get that thing started. I don't even know where to start with that thing. Yeah, it exists. Since its existence, I have never seen that Guam Police Review Commission ever actually functioning at all, period.
Okay, yes.
Only because we worked with former Senator Nelson in her first term. She had some inquiries for us. At the time, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, our research uncovered the commission just not having any more meetings. The ability to develop rules for the commission to be effective just wasn't going to happen. There wasn't any support for administrative support. I know that the Guam Police Department was supposed to supply them with an office and administrative support, but the commission itself decided that they were no longer going to meet because of their inability to develop rules and regulations, like the Post Commission did, and they just don't meet anymore. So there's really nothing that we can do as an agency if they're not meeting.
Okay, well, thank
Yeah.
you for that
We're
update.
probably going to have to look at the law
Yeah,
and start from zero.
Right.
Finding members to appoint, finding out who's going to appoint members, whether it's the legislature, the police, the governor, because I believe there's a combination of people that
Right.
receive appointments to that commission. And like Major Andrews said, though, there was a commission that was formed, had very broad, even allowed for discipline, if I'm not mistaken, or us to present cases to them. But like the Major said, they never adopted any administrative rules. There are no rules that exist for that commission.
Wow, okay. Okay, y'all, I'll start looking at the law again. That's something you might want to look at, Mr. Chair, as well. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Sorry it's taking a long time.
Thank you very
but
much, Senator.
Good information.
Mr. Chair, can I just end the point on the
Senator Lujan, yes?
Yes, just on the police commission, real quick with that. I know there was a situation between the police commission and, of course, civil service, and the disciplinary action with the police commission, is subservient basically to civil services situation there. So that was I know because I know my sister sat on that, and they met a couple times, and they decided to basically stop meeting because of that situation between their being subservient to civil service in whatever their findings or disciplinary actions may be.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Thank you for that, Senator Lujan. I'd like to recognize Senator Sabina Perez. Good afternoon, Senator.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief, and thank you to the Guam Police Department and also Guam Customs Quarantine. I just want to thank you, Chief. Every time I send you a message, you're very responsive, and I appreciate that. I know we get a lot of constituents call in regarding, especially with the robberies in their neighborhood. And, I understand a lot of that is probably connected to the meth epidemic, which is very concerning to me. And I just want, maybe part of this discussion is to, maybe we can highlight some of the areas that we really need to focus on to develop a coordinated approach. And so one of the things that I want to congratulate you too is having access to the Postal Service. I think that was one of the weak points when it comes to interdiction. And so I think that the increase in catching meth has been attributed to that access. And I just wanted to encourage you to continue that effort. I think the other weakness is the port. And so in your presentation, you state that GPD cannot bring the canine into the port unless there's probable cause. Is there any way that we can improve that access to GPD? Is it a change in law, or is it a memorandum of agreement?
The jurisdiction of the port is covered by the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency as well as the Port Police. So in moving forward, we probably would have to look at developing some sort of agreement to assist in the utilizations through some sort of task force.
Okay, that would be great, because I think that's the other weakness that that needs to be addressed. Oh, do you have a comment on that,
No,
Chief?
I agree with you. We don't have much enforcement at the port, but again, because police have also limited powers, with regards to search and seizure. It's a border search, and we are not authorized to do border searches.
Okay. Yeah, I know we passed a law, I believe in the last term, regarding extending the construction of the facility, the custom satellite inspection holding secured sterile facility. I know we had several meetings on that one, and if you can, what's the progress of that? Because I think that would be really critical in interdiction.
So at this point in time, we've already got a design. What we're awaiting for is the funding of the A&E. And normally the A&E is about 10% of the entire cost for the facility. So the facility will cost between 10 and maybe 12 or 13 million dollars. So we're looking at all these other means, but we already have a preliminary drawing of what we'd like to see. It's been vetted. It's just a matter of just getting the funding instituted.
Do you have access to the ARPA funds for that?
No, but we could look into it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we would qualify, but if we're looking at any opportunity to obtain any type of funding anywhere, we will try to dig it out.
Okay. We'll definitely look into that. Budget time is coming up, so as well as the ARPA funds, I know there's a deadline to expend those funds, so if we can maybe reprogram that. I really like the questioning of my previous colleague about getting more the pipeline into the police force. And I know this is a conversation that we have with the Department of Corrections. For those that fail the test, right, is there a boot camp that can perhaps address some of the areas that they need to improve upon? So that could be, basically your pool is being reduced in half, right? So as far as those that take the test. So that's probably a quicker route to get, that's your potential pool, to increase your pool of police officers. Has there been any discussions in regards to having a specified boot camp?
Yeah. So, to your point, Senator Perez, Major Joe Carbolito has been meeting with DOA, Mr. Shane Nata, and one of the things that we're trying to get a handle on is what are they failing? Are they failing math? Are they failing English, reading comprehension? Is it question number 4 that they're always failing, right? We don't know because we don't administer the test. So one of Major Carbolito's in his meetings is to kind of go back and review all the tests that we administered because we don't know when they were last updated or when they were last revised. So he's been working on that with Mr. Shane Nata. But we have promotions going on, so we're going to revisit those other tests after the promotions are done. Yeah, because we don't want to hold up our promotions any longer.
Okay. Yeah, keep us posted.
Yeah,
Would you
I
like to
think
comment?
one of the things that we need to look at is content validity, right? Is it job related? We don't know what the questions are. That's why I want to take a look at it with DOA, right, present, and just make sure that the questions that are in that test is related to the job specifically that they're applying for, right? Sometimes they ask general questions that might not even, be a logical question to ask for a police officer, to be out in this. I think it should be more hypothetical, to be honest with you. I always say this when I used to teach in GCC is I'd rather have a partner, out in the streets that has common sense than somebody that's book smart that doesn't know what to do in the streets when they're out there. And it happens even in the academy. You have smart guys that are book smart. When they go out on the job training, they don't know what to do or they freeze up because it's all common sense sometimes that you need out there. So those are some of the things that we might need to look at and revisit as far as the questions are concerned.
Okay, thank you for that response. I guess the other question I have is regarding the statistics, the juvenile crimes. So I know there's one part where a big portion is miscellaneous. What is that?
What page are you on there?
Let me see if I can find that. So I forgot to mark the page. But I recall the biggest number was miscellaneous. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on the crimes are being committed by juveniles.
Let's go through section 5, special reports. Starts on page 61. There's juvenile offenses, figure 5-2. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I think I saw the bar chart. There was a lot that was identified.
Figure 5-3, page 66. There's all other offenses, 135.
Yes, that one. Yeah, that's correct.
Let me see. So in reading through the chart, it tells you what they're arrested for. So all other offenses could be things like curfew violations or beyond control. Could be possession of what's illegal for them to possess, like vape products, alcohol, tobacco. Yeah.
Is it possible to get a breakdown? Because, if we're seeing meth in the community, I'm wondering if it's being mirrored in the juvenile crimes or offenses.
Sure.
And if this is something that we need to look at.
Major Fred's here. He will have his MIS people look into it. Yeah. And see what all other offenses are. Because I'm assuming at this point, because it's not listed, it looks like the tobacco and alcohol offenses. Because they're illegal for minors.
Yeah, because there is a section for liquor law violations.
Right.
So it's actually desegregated from the list.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
just wondering.
we'd have to break it down and go into it.
I'll have it broken down. I'll get our guys to break it. Sorry. I'll get our guys from our planning and research as well as our MIS folks to break it down further. And like the chief was mentioning, more than likely is what we call those status offenses. So it's not necessarily illegal to like possess, like a pocket knife, but for like minors, especially like in a school-related situation, it becomes an offense because they'll call us. We'll take the minor into custody and those kind of things. So it could be related to that, what the chief was mentioning. But I'll have it broken down and get it to you.
So like school fighting, would that be in there? Like fighting?
Probably fighting, smoking, things like that.
Okay.
Yes, and they're called status offenders, beyond control. So these are not necessarily quote-unquote crimes per se, but they're violations that are committed by minors.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
Is there a pattern for the violations for juveniles and adults? Is there a connection? Do you see connection?
Excuse me, what do you mean by
between-
connection?
So I guess does it mirror what happens in the adult population as far as crimes? Is it mirrored in the youth?
Well, like they say, right? Most kids, and like the good senator said, alcohol, for those that don't know, that's being naughty. They usually, like we use the word graduate, right? Because if there's no interdiction or intervention at those levels when they're a minor, then they end up becoming criminals in the adult world. So, yes, that's why, like the chief mentioned about putting these, it's called COPS, community-oriented police programs, right? So that we can try and get that intervention done at the earlier level so that hopefully we can deter them from becoming criminals. Because usually those criminals that are adults, they usually were criminals as minors or committed offenses as minors. So yeah, so there's a correlation between the minors and the adults.
Is there a program specifically to address that?
Well, I think Juvenile's got a couple of
Yeah,
couple of programs.
the overarching program is called Project View, and that includes everything from our Fade Away from Violence kickball tournament. And man, there's nothing better than seeing 400 elementary age kids play kickball. Very competitive, to say. We also have our summer youth camp, Project View Summer Youth Camp, which not only runs in the summer but also during the December intersession. We have the junior police cadet programs, that we're starting up again. So yeah, we got a bunch of programs going on with our youth so that we can steer them away from drugs, really, and violence and gangs and all that.
And can I just segue into that? I'm sorry. Sergeant Paul Tapaja has incorporated some of the Crime Stoppers programs in the schools. I know one was done at JFK, I believe, last year. So yeah, so there are some programs that, like the chief was mentioning, and it's, you know, part of that COPS initiative where try and get some intervention programs for kids at a very young age so that we can deter them from, you know, becoming, you know, those agogwat kids.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Chief, and thank you to your staff for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sabina. I just had a question since we're talking about the Port Authority of Guam. I remember it was a few years back, kind of the turnover of the first Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration, and I had interviewed Customs Director Ike Paredo, and he had told me that, and I don't know if this is still accurate, but at the time, the last time there was a seizure at the port was 2017. And so we were, again, privy to a briefing by federal officials in this room, and they expressed frustration because they told my colleagues and I that they know that crystal meth is coming in through the port, but they just can't catch them. And it kind of reminds me of the situation with the major drug organizations. And again, I spoke before the chamber about this, you know, I've had conversations with so many different people in law enforcement, and we all know who these major drug organizations are. It's the same thing with the port. You have federal officials saying they know that drugs are coming in through the Port Authority of Guam, yet we're not seeing any traction on that. And I think people are past losing faith, and I just got to ask, I mean, a lot of the answers that we get when we're asking questions are we just don't have enough officers, customs, your 30% staff. Obviously, we know there's so many issues with recruitment and retention at GPD. But is it just a case where these people bringing in these drugs, these major drug organizations or organization, are they just outsmarting us?
So imagine, if you will, looking for a needle in one haystack, right? So imagine that's customs. So imagine that you have multiple haystacks all over the place. So one of the things that if we can't get the human resource as far as like the eyes and the ears out there to be able to have a collaborative effort in trying to find that one needle, that you work smarter. So with the use of technology and other collaboration, we can get there. So, you know, I'm not gonna just lay it completely on the lack of resources, but keep in mind that at this point in time, we're also struggling for technology and management information systems to be able to do risk assessments at the ports of entry, that we don't have access to the same types of mechanisms that you would find like with our federal counterparts as far as like customs review and risk management. So if we're able to do something towards that end, it would help us to at least bridge partly the gap that we're experiencing at this point in time. We're doing, with what we have, we're doing the best that we can. Of course, if you ask the question, can we get better at it? Yes, we can. But a lot of times we're relegated to do what we need to do with the amount of people that we have. And then, you know, the chief of police mentioned it earlier about with the same issues that he has, like military deployments and people on leave. We're facing the same situation. I'm going to go back to our heyday. We had 225 plus officers back in the 90s, and now we're down to 108. So with that being said, and there's more that has to be inspected and looked at and investigated, and now with terrorism coming into play on top of everything else we have to contend with since September 11th, we're spreading our resources so thinly that eventually, you know, I mean, you can see the result in the community today. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but if we're able to get the...
Chief, has there been any, because the data that we were provided with doesn't really break it down, but has there been a significant bust of large amounts of crystal meth at the Port Authority of Guam?
Well, I can tell you that our guys are doing the job that needs to be done, and I can't comment on anything that might be ongoing that could jeopardize anything. I mean, especially right now, we're in a public forum, so.
Right. Well, how about not ongoing? I mean, in the last, let's say, 3 years, has there been a significant bust of or discovery of meth at the Port Authority of Guam or not?
Well, I can't,
You don't?
because I'm not in that. If it were, then we would be able to discuss it openly, but I can't say one way or the other at this point.
Would the X-ray machine at the port mean 100% inspections?
Whatever we have at the port as far as like being set up for X-ray does get X-rayed, but you have to also keep in mind that the technology that we have is several years or more. We're looking at trying to obtain an additional X-ray as well as other technologies to help us with interdiction efforts. So we do what we can with the resources that we have.
Chief? Did you? Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe Major, are we able to say anything about, because I just want to give the people some hope out here, right? I mean, it is what it is, and we all know what it is that there are elements of our island who I think, you know, most people believe are part of a major drug organization, and they walk around and deal drugs and poison our people seemingly without impunity. And we all know it kind of stemmed from a village gang, and now they've become very advanced and evolved in the trafficking and the alleged trafficking and the alleged laundering, right? And we see it out there. And so the island's been overrun by these individuals, yet, you know, we've all suffered through this pandemic, but these drug dealers have been, you know, some of the only people who've gotten rich over the last few years, and you see it. And
Right. So I would say, Senator, that I don't want to say as plainly as it seems that they're outsmarting us, but their constitutional rights, they do know, right? So when we develop cases, narcotics cases are unlike any other type of criminal case. Cases are developed by police officers, and all the other cases we respond to because they're different types of crimes that have already been committed. But during the commission of these crimes, narcotics crimes, we have officers that are playing dual roles as intelligence officers and working with federal agencies. So it's a very complex, and you can imagine, I'm pretty sure people have seen dramatizations of these types of things on TV, and it's not like TV. We really don't have, I won't say too much, but it seems like they're outsmarting us, but it's very plain to see, right? We all have constitutional rights, we're Americans, and it's not like we can just, you know, establish PC in our head and break the door down. It's very difficult today. We do have officers that have gone to schools for, you know, getting into the dark net, you know, ripping phones, ripping computers, right? So there is technology available for our guys. A few of our officers have gone to school with the Secret Service and FBI, the DEA, or with the U.S. Postal Service. We have 9 agents with the federal agencies here on the island. And they do a great deal of work, narcotics work, but they've outsmarted us in a lot of ways. As you see, when we entered the post office, you see the seizures increase.
Right.
And the only data that's really available that we can get, right, is the data of seizures that are funded through federal grant, right? So the Burn Justice Assistance Grant funds the agencies, the law enforcement agencies, and these task force offices. And when they seize that, they report that to the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. So we can see the amount of seizures per year based on the strategic plan that's agreed upon with the Department of Justice. So those types of data we can access. But like the chief said, you know, when we talk about investigations, which we really try not to talk about, it's centric to intelligence, right? So narcotics, like I was saying, right, we develop cases,
Right.
and without the intelligence, if intelligence is released, then it makes it that much harder to, you talked about money laundering earlier, right? Do we have is that beyond our scope, right? We ask ourselves in a room, four officers, right? How do we develop a case on money laundering, right? Are they using the money exchange companies, right? Without saying too much, right? Are they going over there and they're using tourist identification cards to launder money, right? I mean, there's many different ways to launder money. The four officers in the room are asking themselves, can I develop a case, right? So it really comes down to the scope of the investigation and do we have the ability to do it? And when we don't, we use the resources that we have, mainly the federal government, even the military, right? And not even narcotics cases, homicide cases, we're using the military, right? Because they're involved in some way, shape, or form. So the teamwork is very, very important, most especially when the resources are very few, right? And narcotics cases are very, very difficult to investigate.
Right, yeah.
And we've been trying our best, working as a team. I do my part as a member of this team, right? And I'd like to have 8 narcotics agents, but I just can't ask because it takes away from another mission, right? So that's really our issue.
Thank you for that, Major. I don't know if Chief Harris can answer this, and then we'll move on to my colleagues, but is there a metric whereas if you make a certain number of seizures, then there's and I'm sure you've heard of this, then you calculate that with how much is getting through that you're not seizing? Because when we make these, and I mean, I commend everybody, we're making massive seizures, right? But what we're seeing out here in the streets, you guys are able to increase drug arrests by 383%, which means, matutuday meth, right? It's just everywhere. So is there a metric where you guys can calculate or guesswork maybe if we're seizing, 5 50-pound bags of rice, then that means, 50 are getting through?
No, we don't have a metric. It just seems like researching the information and then doing comparisons between what we've seen in the past and the price that the community that it's using at large is paying for it. And that's kind of, I guess, a way of looking at a metric.
And I will say, again, I commend you and I thank you for that, Major, but and this is a conversation we had back in the campaign, is if you track when we were in our heyday with a large number of officers in the Guam Police Department, right? Guam Customs had everyone they needed. The price of meth was $1,000 a gram, but as we've seen these retention and recruitment issues worsen over the decades, I mean, it is what it is. This is what you get when you don't fund adequately and you're not able to address all these different things. And we had a conversation, Chief, you told me that you guys still haven't recovered from the first early out retirement, and now you're anticipating even further losses with this latest early retirement, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's, with the exception of civilians, everybody's sitting here at the table. Yeah,
Eligible.
We've got over 30 years each of experience. Yeah, and with 2.75, you calculate that. We're just, retirement's not too far away. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. Right. Senator Joanne Brown, good afternoon.
Hafadiri, Mr. Chair, good afternoon to you as well. I do have to say I'm pleased with the fact that we are proceeding with these type of engagements and having these forums. And I'll tell you, it's my third year, beginning of my third year back after a 14-year absence. And it's probably the most we've had in quite some time of having this type of discussion, because I think bringing it out in the open and talking about it and bringing the problems, we can't resolve everything, but to the things we can or what we can address and improve, I think we have a lot to gain from the engagement. I think even more importantly, it gives our people an insight on where things are within their community and certainly issues and concerns we may have on both sides of the aisle. Chief, I concur with my colleagues, and it's concerning to us, and not just on your shoulders, but certainly because our committee also has oversight over Department of Education. I think this is a growing concern, is the capabilities of our young people when they graduate from school, and I don't know if all these applicants attended public school on Guam, or did they attend private school? I have no idea. I'm just assuming because of the larger number of our students that do graduate from the public education system. It is concerning because since I left the legislature back in 2006, we've almost tripled the amount of funding to education. And I hope that we also look with a very clear and sharp pencil, ensuring that the money's going, that their benefits to our children are actually being, developed, because if they're not, I'm all for redesigning the system if it needs to be, because if we're not getting the desired outcome, I don't see the value in keeping a structure if it's not meeting its ultimate objective, and that objective is to ensure that our children have the most basic skills in life to be able to go out, apply for a job, and be able to pursue a career where they can be a contributing member of our community. It's very bothersome to me to hear this, and it's not just, your applicants that are applying for the Guam Police Department. We're hearing this in other areas. We're hearing this in the private sector of business people are trying to hire employees and not seeing these basic capabilities of adding, subtracting, and writing. I did want to ask you, and I see some of the comments that were made, that perhaps you don't even know what they're testing your applicants on. I mean, when you applied, I know it might have been a number of years, but do you know if it's even the same test you may have taken when you first applied to the Guam Police Department? And I don't see any reason why you can't be privy to that. To determine, as you mentioned, because who else would know what the relevant questions are to ask an applicant, and what level of, capability would you need them to have in order to at least start at the very beginning, so that they could look at a viable career in law enforcement. If any of you could, would be in a position to respond to that.
I'm sorry, ma'am. What was that question again?
With regards to the test, I know it was mentioned
Right.
a little earlier that you're not aware of what's, at least your key people here are not aware perhaps of what's in the test, what the questions are.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I'm saying, I don't see any reason why DOE can't provide that so that you can ensure that the questions that are being placed
We haven't
are
seen
relevant.
we haven't seen the test yet. Major Joe
Okay.
was just recently tasked to do that. I haven't seen the test. I just keep wondering what's on that test that 90% can't pass.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't think it's.
I can tell you when I took the test 30 years ago,
Yeah.
it wasn't
30
that
years.
difficult. But, different people though, right? I have not seen the test since then, right? And I don't think anybody has seen it. You're probably, that's kind of like confidential, right? To put out there. So, we're going to revisit that, and we're going to make sure, that's my job now, tasked by the chief to look at it and make sure that it is, like I said, the content validity is, is there for the job itself, right? And it's specific to what you're supposed to be doing out and, when you become a police officer. I hope that there's no math questions that are like, geometry or algebra, and so.
Well, I think certainly it would be good to do that. And then also the other discussion that happened a little earlier with regards to, is there any type of option to go back and do some kind of course or training? Because if you have a pool of 1,000 that applied, at least out of there you have, that number that at least have expressed the interest in wanting to apply for the force. But maybe we might be able to still capture some more of them if there's additional follow-up or training that can be provided. I mean, I know one of the concerns that have been raised is even for the Attorney General's office is sometimes even the current police reports for some that are being provided are not as clear in terms of the wording and the writing of existing police officers. And I don't know, Chief, if you have ongoing orientation programs. I mean, I couldn't write a police report. I'd have to get trained to find out. I'm sure there are very specific questions that need to be responded to in an investigation that if I were to write a report, I'd need to follow a certain format to do that. But, it's all part of the process, an important part of the process. I mean, writing, the basic skills of writing and reading and arithmetic at the basic level are critical skill sets that we need. And even if you're already in the career, there might be a need for a little brushing up or improvement.
Yes, we
that.
meet with the AG's office. As a matter of fact, when I met with the new chief prosecutor, Ms. Heather Zona, that's one of the things I mentioned is that we'd like to get ROCO training from the AG's office so that we can come together and understand where we're lacking and where we're doing well, and brushing up, like you said, on the things that need to be done. And report writing skills have come up as an issue before. But like you said, unless you tell us what's wrong,
Right.
it's hard for us to correct it if we don't know what needs to be corrected.
Very true, and I find too. I mean, I do homework these days, so I'm back to the basics, and I know repetition and practice. If something's new and you don't understand it, the more confident you get, the better you do. You just sometimes have to go over it and over it until you understand it, and
Right.
it makes a big difference. So I'm doing well so far, doing homework. But I see the value in that. And I can also understand that if you're not comfortable with something, we have a lot of, when something's new or it seems a little more difficult, there's a hesitancy. You don't run towards it. The natural instinct is to withdraw and pull away and maybe not pursue it because it seems a little scary because you don't do it as well. It can be uncomfortable, but like I said, a little more orientation, a little more practice, you might be surprised, obviously. I mean, we all find that out on what our capabilities are, but I appreciate that, but definitely, Mr. Chair, I think as we're looking at Department of Education and their budget, I'm also going to want to be looking at the test scores and level of performance because we're spending an awful lot. When you talk about the Guam Police Department, you're not the only key operations government that has substantially downsized. Public Works, when I was there, went from a large agency of 1,000 during the time of Benigno Palomo, during the ad administration, to a medium-sized agency. But yet our people will say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing in maintaining our roads and potholes? And, can you at least put the marker? Because I can't see when it's raining at night. And we get a lot of those complaints as we're getting older. We have the same concerns. But the cost of government has continued to rise. So where's the money going? And if we're going to prioritize more money going in one direction at the expense of others, we definitely want to see delivery. I don't want to just be here as we've done in the past to continue to fund the government and the outcome is no different. We just sustain, but we don't strive for excellence to continue to improve the quality of service that we provide. So I certainly hope our committee looks into that because I think that's a critical area. I also wanted to ask if a citizen has a concern or complaint, because I had one that was brought to my attention. I've discussed this with Senator Frank Blas, where an individual was involved in a car accident and they were injured and they were not coherent after the accident to be able to contribute their insight or their position with regards to that accident as to what transpired. And this individual complained that the officer after, when this individual was able to come back on island because they had to go off island for treatment as a result of that accident, that the officer that did the report was not welcoming of hearing this individual's side, because there's liability, obviously. Who's going to end up paying the cost of what, or medical care or whatever? The officer was not open to listening to the concerns of that individual. The time was not conscious enough to respond at the site of the accident. And the officer, I assume, had made the report, maybe along with the other party that was involved in the accident, and the individual that had suffered the consequence had a different perspective, but did not feel that that individual's perspective was taken by that officer and found that officer to be hostile.
Yeah. Being the former head of the Highway Patrol Division, I will tell you that if a person is not satisfied with the findings of the preliminary officer or the patrol officer at the scene, they can come up to the chief's office and request for what's called a reinvestigation.
Okay.
And you got to remember that we also look at most of the times in a traffic accident or a traffic crash, you look at the evidence that presented to you at the scene,
Sure.
right, and the statement made, and usually the damages
Yes.
to the vehicles will kind of support or go against any statements made, right? So, but absolutely, we're always open to welcoming any request for reinvestigations. I've done that in the
and it's just
past.
to know that the members of the public have the option to do that, because it's kind of intimidating, not
Right,
everyone wants
yeah.
to, go to the police department, and it's just, even if you're a law-abiding citizen, you're kind of like, oh my God, I better slow down because I'm speeding, here's the car,
No, absolutely.
You understand what I mean?
yeah,
It
come to
can be
the-
intimidating, so.
Come to the chief's office or come to our Highway Patrol Division and make a request for a reinvestigation. We'll look at it and see if there's any merit. The only time we don't do a reinvestigation if a citation is issued, then that'll have to be adjudicated by the court first.
Well, and I think that's where the problem is, because citations issued, and then what do you do if you've not, and if the individual's position had not been heard because they were injured at the crash site? I mean, that's at their disadvantage. They're not able to put input on what happened.
Okay.
I mean, the evidence may show something, but sometimes the circumstance may have been very different.
Definitely, we're more than open to
But
looking at the
it puts
case.
that individual who's injured at a disadvantage, and I think that needs to be addressed. And again, and I'm sure that individual, and I'll take you up on that, I'll notify them that they can come and
Yes,
see you.
yes, ma'am.
Because they just felt that their input was not welcomed and they felt the officer was hostile towards them. And, you know,
And I apologize for
and the
that.
complaint that I got was not from somebody who I think would be a wallflower. You know, this person has a pretty good standing in this community, and I would think no reason for them to have to encounter that or anyone else for that matter. With regard to drug testing, I know last term we had discussed that, and you had relayed that for the first time in many years, you actually did drug testing of your officers and
Yes.
those in designated positions. Are you continuing to do that on a regular basis, or what is your plan for that?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, my personal officer just distributed the test designated position flyer required by DOA. And so that's usually the first step that we take. And then we meet with DOA to schedule drug testing. We determine the percentage. Are we going to test 70%, 80%, 100%? You know, that's a conversation we have with the DOA.
And I hope we continue to do that on a regular basis. I mean, there was an executive order by previous administration that actually required this to be done almost on an annual basis. And we're finding in the course of government agencies that that really is not happening with any consistency.
Yeah, I did one in 21, and we're going to do one soon.
And I think it's important to relay the message to our public that those that are actually enforcing the law, you know, are also abiding by it. I think that's very important. And because we have such a prevalent drug problem on Guam, I think it's even more critical that everyone in public service, and I recognize that it's primarily on the shoulders of those in designated positions, but I think it's important to send out that message that, you know, we're walking a straight line if we expect everyone else in our community to do so. Chief, I'm supportive of the idea, and you know, we recognize the politics. Let's not kid ourselves. You know, the across-the-board pay raise for law enforcement by the administration, to me, the way, you know, ring-a-ding-ding in my brain, having been doing this for a long time, is, you know, it's election time. Sounds good. Let's say it, support law enforcement. But I think we all, you know, discussing among ourselves, came to the consensus that it didn't benefit you at the end of the day. It didn't benefit the Guam Police Department. And I totally concur with what you said. I mean, the ones who we see do most of the heavy lifting out in the community that directly interface with the public, that the public wants to see, is you guys. And I would be supportive. I'm not crazy with all the pay raises left and right, especially when they're political, especially when promotions are political. I hate that. I think people that do the work and put the investment deserve it. And the kiss-uppers, I don't care for it. I don't. I've never cared for it in my operations running agencies, and I don't appreciate it. Because I just think it's demoralizing to those that, and that's why a lot of people, it's not just money. People walk out because they see that kind of nonsense going on. That's why they don't want to continue on, because it doesn't matter how hard they work. You know, the next time they apply for the promotion, they ain't going to get it, especially if they're not in the right side of the road at the moment. So, but I would look at that, because I think our community needs it. We need to have a sense of comfort. I lived on Guam most of my life, and I'll tell you quite frankly, it's the most uncomfortable I've been in this community. And I think a lot of our people feel that way.
Yeah. If I may, if I can go back to the law enforcement pay plan that was implemented, there is, though, in defense of that pay plan, Chief knows this, for the Guam Police Department, we were given a retention pay incentive. So everybody got 18% across the board. But for police officers, depending on your rank, you would get anywhere from a 10 to 15% retention incentive. That didn't apply to the other public safety or law enforcement
Well,
agencies.
then maybe we need to look at it also. I don't mean to, we do these across the board things with the idea that we're going to catch everybody, but again, it doesn't necessarily benefit where we need it. It's like the public auditor's office. I don't mind supporting them and paying them more, because I want everybody who's a qualified, good auditor to work for the public auditor, because I want them to have really sharp pencils, you know, to do what we need in government. And so you mentioned your other positions at the Guam Police Department that were not included, that, you know, there's not a lot of incentive to stay in those positions.
Oh, yeah, no, those are the ones outside of the law enforcement pay plan, in the general pay plan.
And those are
Our
things certainly,
dispatchers, our criminalists, the civilian positions, yeah.
certainly that we can look at. The other thing too, you know, there's a lot of bragging about all this additional revenue every month we have coming into the island, and we know, those of us that have been around long enough know that that is not going to sustain itself. I mean, this is a strange moment in time because of this pandemic, and of course we certainly anticipated when we left the Calvo administration, Guam had the next 10 years of financial benefit from the military buildup of the bases that are happening. But we also know that as that concludes, the revenue base is going to go down. So I don't see it forever, you know, living in this, because most of my time here has been trying to keep above board. We've sometimes had to redo the budget 3, 4, 5 times in a single fiscal year to get through the fiscal year. But these are opportunities, colleagues, we have certainly, you know, if it's providing additional infrastructure resource or, you know, money to seed money or financing to build a building or something like that, maybe that's something we can look at, because this opportunity probably is not going to be here for probably quite some time, if ever at all, so that we can maybe address some of these infrastructure needs that otherwise you don't get any annual funding to address. I don't have too many other questions, but like I said, I think we really, I look forward maybe, Mr. Chair, at another forum. I hope we continue this maybe on a quarterly basis. Definitely the issue with regards to those that are applying for positions that are not able to pass. I'm hopeful that that can be addressed. And again, I hope that when we just look into DOE, we're looking at the caliber and capability of the majority of our students that are graduating from the Guam public school system. With that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know it's been a few hours. We're used to it, but appreciate you all taking the time. I know your chief's pretty much the one doing all the talking back to us on the questions, but certainly appreciate all of you
Got a lot
taking
of
the time
water,
to
man.
come here this afternoon.
Okay.
It comes with a job, right?
I finished the
Okay, thank
first
you.
one.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Yeah, we got to find a way to let everyone talk, 'cause I don't want you to show up for nothing. Senator Frank Blas Jr., good afternoon. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Don't worry, I'm used to it. Good afternoon, Chief, Majors.
Afternoon, sir.
Everybody think. You know, Major, Chief, okay, I've known, been there, done that, and so.
Yes, you have.
Let me go through some of your numbers, okay? And this is based on this report,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
from this, your organizational chart, okay? Okay, it says here you have about 284 uniformed officers
Yes, sir.
right now, okay? And I'm going to go down some of these numbers here that you have. You have 175 in Operations Bureau, right?
That's Major Joe. Yeah, that's all of the precincts, Highway Patrol, and SOD.
Okay, well, let me start here with Major Joe. District 1 and District, okay, before it was Central, Northern, Central, Southern. How many beats do we have now?
How many districts or
No, how many
precincts?
beats?
Beats, there's
Yeah.
28.
28 beats now. Wow. With only 175 officers? Wow. How many do you have in District 1?
5, 9.
9?
9.
Officers or 9 officers or 9 beats?
Beats. You guys-
9 officers.
Oh, no.
Beats.
No,
Beats.
in District 1, there's 9 beats.
9 beats.
As far as total number of officers,
How many do you have in the precinct?
we average about anywhere from
60
32 to 35 per
about
precinct.
64.
Per precinct.
Right.
64 in District 1.
64 in District 1. How about District 2?
District 2, it's about the same.
64?
About 64.
Okay.
Close to about 128 boots on the ground.
Okay, so that's your front line, right? That's 128.
Right.
128 for 28
That's
beats.
just patrol officers.
Yeah, okay. How many do you have in your SOD, Special Ops?
I think we have 20, 25?
25? And then in your Highway Patrol, how many do you have?
About 12.
Okay. How many do you need?
A lot.
How many times, though? How many, I mean, I know
Like the
you're
chief
working
said,
with,
we-
you're working with 175 total.
Yeah.
So,
Well-
based on the current beat patterns,
Right.
with the four precincts, you take 28, you multiply that by 4 shifts, right? That's how many people we need daily. Yeah. So, if you had 8 at, if you had fully staffed at Deadero precinct, you would have 6 or 7 officers. Yeah, because 5, because the
4
morning
plus
has
1?
4, because they have so it's 9 total beats, right?
Right.
But yeah, on any given day, there's 28 beats. Each beat, if each beat is manned with 28 officers, that's how much you need for the day. So you would need 28 in the first shift, 28 in the second shift, because we have 2 shifts. That's
Only,
56.
you're only running 2 shifts?
We're running 12-hour shifts.
12-hour shifts.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 3.5 days on, but with the shortage, we're looking anywhere from 4 12-hour shifts or 5 12-hour shifts. I know officers that unfortunately maybe only have a day and a half off or 2 days off because we're that short. And some of the shortage, you know, it's not only because we're short of officers, but we have unexpected leave. We actually have, again, I talked about the military deployment. I mean, I have about 3 or 4 officers on long-term military deployment, meaning they're gone anywhere from 1 year to 3 years. And that doesn't include, you know, the officers who go on annual leave, sick leave, whatever. And then we have the short-term military leave that really catches you by surprise and takes you off guard because they go for a 6-month period, a 3-month period, a 1-month period. And really, when you're gone for a month, you know, they feel it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you also have the medical profiles.
Then medical profiles.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Overtime in just in your bureau. What are you averaging?
Do you have that? I
Overtime?
don't have that.
Just in this bureau?
Overtime for Operations Bureau, I think what are we tracking? So we're tracking about $500,000 for overtime, but that's for the whole department.
Per year?
Yeah, so we don't have it broken down today by Operations Bureau at least.
Okay.
But the bulk of the overtime though is Operations Bureau.
Okay. Investigations Bureau, 36?
We have 28 investigators. 28 investigators in 5 sections.
Mm-hmm. Can you
That
break
doesn't
them down
include
by-
that doesn't include the 5 sergeants that are supervising those folks. So the majority of the work is done by 28 investigators with 5 sections. We do consider the federal task force as a section in and of itself. So we have 1 supervisor there and 8 investigators pumping out reports or pumping out cases. Then we have 8 investigators at CIS, 1 supervisor. Juvenile investigations, we have 4 investigators, 1 supervisor, 1 is on leave, medical leave. We have DART unit is supported mainly by federal grant, right? So we have that unit that's now moved over from the chief's office a few years back. It's now at CIS or CID, and they have 4 investigators, 1 supervisor, sergeant, and we also have a victim advocate. We had 2, but 1 quit and went to the Navy. Today's our last day, so you know, better pay, right? So she left for them, and Special Investigations Section, we lost a few narcotics officers to the AG's office. They probably want to come back, but they're there right now. Narcotics guys.
How many guys
So-
you got there in SAS?
Yeah, so we only have 3 investigators currently at SIS with 1 supervising sergeant. But like I said earlier, the federal task force guys are mainly doing narcotics investigations along with SIS. So,
You got 9 there, right?
I'm sorry?
How many you got at federal? How
Federal
many do you-
task force is 9, but
9, right?
that's like, I think 6 agencies. DEA, HSI, FBI, ATF, Secret Service, and Postal Inspector.
Okay.
And marshals as well, the U.S. Marshal Service. So, and they've been very useful for us. You know, when we.
So Major
every
Fred,
office.
they have more, you had more in your unit when you were in SIS than SIS has in its own
Oh, yeah.
section.
We had 21, if you remember.
Yeah. No, it's 24 because I remember the number of gallstones you guys gave me. Okay.
That too, yeah, the golf balls, sorry.
Senator, when I was at CIS, there was 24. If you look now, each of the sections under CID is only big enough to be staffed by a Sergeant 1. Remember the days where we had a lieutenant in
Yeah.
charge of CIS, GIS, SIS? And that's because you need a lieutenant to run 24 people.
Yeah.
When you're down to 6 people, you only need a sergeant
Yeah.
when you talk about span of control.
When we're all there, the chief, myself, and you, I remembered we're up to 85 officers at CID alone. And I know that because Difuntu Major Aggie told me to get a head count. So, yeah, it was, and that's why I mentioned about Difuntu Scambaluri, right? That that was the days when we were up to those, and we just kept decreasing since then.
Wow. Your Forensic Science Bureau, and that's your crime lab?
Yes, sir.
Is that what that's traditionally called, crime lab?
Yeah, the Forensic Science Bureau is newly created. It's
Tim,
kept
what do you got? How's your?
We have, if you include our major, 28. Without our majors, 27. We've got 13 uniform that are CSI, and the others are civilian criminalists.
Okay, so how many do you have in your bureau? Total?
27. Between 27 and 29, but we had recent transfers.
Okay, because it says 13 here, that's why.
No, the 27
13
is
uniform.
including his civilians.
Yeah. No, the 13 would be including me.
Right.
And staff.
Right.
But if you're going to talk CSIs, yes, that number is correct.
Okay, so how many uniform officers do you have?
That's it, 13, sir.
13? Okay.
13 is the amount of uniform officers assigned to Forensic Science Bureau.
Okay, and Major Fred, you've got 16?
15.
15. You lost one today?
Yes, we did. We're consistently across the board, all the bureaus are losing, so we want to make sure we're consistent at Services Bureau.
And then, of course, Chief, you have 15 in your...
Yeah, that's auxiliary services, the community crime
Right.
task force, internal affairs, legal.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking is because if you add those numbers up, it comes up to 255. You say TF 284.
Yeah. So, sometimes the math is off. The
Yeah, the
retirees.
DI math, like, you know,
Yeah.
it goes back to the entrance exam.
That entrance exam I cannot pass.
Yeah. You know, and it's interesting that we bring up to it as far as the difficulty in the recruitment, okay? Because this was something that we had warned many years ago, not just to the police department, but, you know, system-wide. And when the Department of Education decided to change its track, if you go back and you subtract the ages, what the ages of what your recruits are, your applicants are, okay? And you go back to when we were having these problems, and I'll be very blunt with direct instruction, you're going to find out that these kids were the products and some of your officers. Because I remember a couple of years ago having conversations about some of the concerns about the report writing skills that we have of current officers today. And I appreciate that you're going to go through some staff training, I mean local training with regard to that. But that would, because it's interesting enough, it coincides with the University of Guam and Guam Community College actually having to bring in remedial math and English classes more so than the others, because they were getting school applicants into the university who couldn't pass, you know, to get into the University of Guam. Okay, and so I think that Major, that's where a lot of your issues are going to be with regard to that. I don't think there's anything to do with any of the questions that were asked. I bet you some of those questions that they were probably asking goes back to the old CCC. Okay, but I think that for the most part it's been common sense questions, and that's unfortunately where we're losing track on that. Nothing against you guys, okay? Because remember, you don't even write out the questions. But and for the most part, those questions should be generic to those ASVAB or to those manuals that are constantly bought, okay? Which is basic common sense. So, you know, along those lines, I think that's where we're going to see that, okay? With regards to the recruitment, though, Chief, have you guys ever considered, obviously the University of Guam and the Guam Community College have criminal justice programs. And when you're talking about incentives and stuff, and, you know, already you've got individuals who are really going into criminal justice programs, is being able to offer them, you know, because right now you come in as a PO1, and then is there competition for PO2?
Yes, right now it's competitive. You have
Competitive, right?
Yeah, it's competitive.
So you know, I mean, offer as an incentive. You know, obviously, your PO1, that's the time you're going to use your on-the-job training and getting used to the streets. But then for a promotion into PO2 or even PO3 is because they've got the college credits and everything, is giving them the incentive to be able to do this, and hopefully you can retain them.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about. Alluded to earlier, is that we need to go back and I mentioned during Scamby's days, it was an automatic promotion from PO1 to PO2.
Right.
And that's why, because it's competitive, I opened up more PO2 positions in this upcoming promotion cycle, because I find that they're leaving at PO1. So if I can promote them sooner to PO2, there's an incentive for them to stay. I think what in the short term though, what we're looking at, and I've discussed this with the governor, lieutenant governors, going back and revisiting that PO1 to PO2 automatic promotion, because it used to be automatic after I believe 1 year, but maybe we can look and make it maybe a 3-year cycle, right? After 3 years of being a PO1, you want to make sure you gain some experience and knowledge, then move you on automatically to a PO2.
Yeah.
So that's something, but again, at the end of the day, right, sir, something that costs money, right?
Yeah.
And we have to look
But
at
you
the
know, I mean,
financial.
what you can do is incentivize, and you're already rewarding them for their initiative to get educated.
Right.
Okay? Because, one of the things, like, Joey says, okay, you'd rather have somebody with common sense than be book smart. Now you use that book smart and change it into common sense by giving them, that.
Yeah. We can probably look at building in some college credit requirements.
Yeah.
But actually, you got to remember, when they graduate from the police cycle, they're actually coming in with college credits.
Sure.
All the classes are administered by Guam Community College.
What you want to do is you want to take advantage of individuals who already expressed the desire because they're going through criminal justice courses on their own volition.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's trying to keep them in during that first 5 years from not leaving the Guam Police Department, because everybody loves to hire a Guam Police Department officer.
Oh, yeah.
In the first 5 years.
So does the legislature. Anyway, so one last thing. As a result, obviously, we've gone through 3 years of you guys, working your butts off, with regards to the pandemic. Have you already conducted a hot wash with regards to, what the operations were during the pandemic?
Within the Guam Police Department, we have not had a hot wash, but I know we did participate in the overall Government of Guam hot wash with public health. I think, Major, was that you? Yeah. So Major Kiriguat was the point for that overall Government of Guam response during the DPHSS hot wash.
Well, and the reason why I'm asking this is because one of the components I was hoping that you would be able to discuss in preparation for our meeting that we will be having next week is post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
Okay. And how we intend to be able to deal with it within the PTSD, within our first responders and primary, with our law enforcement.
So, to that point, Senator, when you talk about stress within the Guam Police Department and the what we're exposed to, we actually applied for and received a grant from the federal government, Department of Justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's called LEMWA. It's the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act. And what that does is that it allows us to formulate a peer support group.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling you that
Your
group
big brother, is that your brother program or something like that?
Yeah, it's like your Big Brother program, right? And they've been very effective. Every time we have a scene where they respond to, like, not to get very graphic, but when they responded to the beheading down in Santa Rita, we dispatched the officers, the peer support group, to the officers that responded collectively as a group, and then we broke them off individually to meet with the peer support counselor within the Guam Police Department. If it's beyond our capacity with the police officers who are the peer mentors, then we refer them with a partnership with the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Centers to see actual trained professionals.
Yeah.
So we have within the Guam Police Department trained peer support group, and they've been very effective.
And I appreciate that because, I know that's been effective now. Mm-hmm. What you're dealing with, 60% less of officers that you had at our peak time. Okay? And there's a common point in time where your peer officers are going to need help.
Yes, sir.
So they're going to be a layer upon a layer.
Yes, and I think nationally they recognize that.
Yeah.
That's why they started up the LEMWA program.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, you and I all come from the same time and period being employed with the Guam Police, right? It's just suck it up, boy. You're a
Well,
big
back
boy,
then
move
we
on.
were told to suck it up.
Right.
We know today.
Yeah, we know today that doesn't work.
Yeah.
These guys are. I mean, trust me, I'm affected by it. I think most of us sitting here at the table
I think we all are because
have a vivid memory of
half
some.
of you guys don't even smile anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, I'll just keep it to that. We can have that discussion later on.
Yes, sir.
Okay. But thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like to give Vice Chair Senator Duenas the opportunity to close.
I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, and just real brief closing. Senator Frank and I would constantly go back and forth sometimes on this. what herd was that with Defunto Chijili Cruz, my first cousin, 33rd herd. But, you know, just thinking back to that time, I used to, our cousins, we used to drive him up to training up at GCC, you know, when you guys were doing most of your training up there. And I remember that academy was basically what took through to the final testing and all the way through to the final certification of the officers. And it seems like, you know, with this procedure, we're going to get down to the bottom of it with regard to DOE and making sure that, you know, we can create that pipeline. But Chief and the team, I just want to tell you, I think it was very effective, you being so receptive to the committee getting you the questions. And I got to say, this binder is loaded with good information. I think we're off to a great start in terms of totally getting to solutions where we need to be. Very comprehensive and very well-written report. And I think that's what has allowed for this, you know, this interaction. And so I want to thank you. And I concur with my colleague, Senator Brown, just in terms of the mood, I think, and the way we feel going forward. It's one team, and we've got to get this done. But it's done a wonderful job, and I think we've got a lot to work with now, particularly going into the budget session.
Yeah, and if I may, sir, I'd like to thank my command staff for providing me the information to prepare this. But more importantly, I'd like to thank the 3 ladies here and the 1 lady who's not here with us, who helped me put this presentation together. It's very well presented. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I got to say, Chief, you can see the team effort. It's not just yourself sitting here, you know, kind of controlling the dialogue. All the guys felt free to jump in, give us the up-to-date information and of what you can. But we sympathize with the fact that certainly a lot of the complexities that you guys have are just not things that you can go out and talk about. But it's refreshing to know that you're on the case and that with us, we just got to make sure we get you what you need. I see a lot of enthusiasm and I see the commitment here. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I know that others still have some follow-ups, but I have an appointment. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Dueñas. Senator Lujan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, earlier it was asked, of course, about drugs and meth coming from the majority supposedly coming out from the port, and there was mention about a possibility of maybe having an MOU with the police department for the Port Authority. But let me get this straight, because not all law enforcement are under the same rules and laws, basically. Now, the GPD doesn't have border search authority, does it?
No.
No. Okay. So that being said, even if you go ahead, Captain. Or
Yeah,
Chief, I'm sorry.
So, of course, we love to help our fellow law enforcement brethren in every aspect, but really the jurisdiction of the customs over at the border is really relegated to customs.
Sure.
So,
okay. Yeah. So basically, my question here, or maybe comments, basically is that you guys have the border search authority, the Guam Police Department. You're under the guise of the Fourth Amendment, basically for probable cause.
Right.
Right. Okay. So based on initial investigations and things like that, the best place to initiate investigation is to the borders, where you can really search, find, and move towards advance investigation. Right.
yes. It's
So
a collective
basically,
effort.
I mean, so that being said, having no authority based on, again, Fourth Amendment, probable cause, they have the border search authority. That's the best place to start, and again, you know, it just calls for if in fact all these drugs are coming in through the port, the best way to do, rather than the MOU, is to man up the
Ports of
customs and
entry.
quarantine folks, give them all the tools and mechanisms for that, because again, they are not relegated by the Fourth Amendment. They can search, find, and move to advance investigation right off the bat, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. Chief, I again appreciate you guys being here, but I know you're so busy, and I don't want to have to be calling you in here all the time, so if I could just wrap up with just some of the other questions that I had. And I wanted to start relative to we were talking about the formation of the Marianas Islands Border Enforcement Safety Task Force, BEST. In your testimony, you indicate that you're now vetting a new officer to be assigned to HSI to contribute to the best mission. Can you are you able to provide more info on what vetting an officer involves?
Yes, sir. So when we assign an officer to a task force, he technically becomes an FBI agent, a U.S. Marshal, a DEA agent. So the vetting process is really done by the federal agency. They go through your background. They basically do a background investigation to make sure you're fit for the job. Yeah, so not everybody can cut it. Yeah, you are vetted by the federal agency. Yeah, they do everything from your personal to your financial investigation, and they talk to your coworkers and make sure that you're held in high regard, because you're going to be some of the stuff that they do at FBI I don't even know about, and even if my task force officer is there, he won't talk to me because he's sworn to the information that he has from that investigation, because he's technically now an FBI agent or marshal.
And I know you had the press conference yesterday on the alleged police corruption.
Yes, sir.
I did want to ask, because, and just kind of going back to the frustration I was expressing on behalf of the people of Guam and Major Kittigwa, as we get these revelations so many years after the fact, and you find out things are happening from these court documents, and so many years later, there's no improvement. It's actually worse, right? So do you think that there's anything, when you look back at some of these court documents, that the Guam Police Department might have missed, or the feds might have missed, in terms of allegedly corrupt officers? And does the Guam Police Department have, I know some departments have an Office of Personal Responsibility where they do things like, investigate their own, on a policeman's salary?
That's pretty much the internal affairs section.
Okay.
And in relation, and I make this clear yesterday, in relation to the recently unsealed documents, because of the amount of time that has passed, the amount of people that have to be interviewed, even though it happened 6 years ago, because we're just knowing about it now, I have a duty, not only by statute, but of course as the chief, to look into the allegations, whether it just involve former officers, retired officers, or does it involve any current police officers? But there's a lot of work, and we're just still in the early stages. I had to reassign an officer. I had to borrow one from Major Joe's division to send over to Internal Affairs, to help us out with this investigation, because it's going to be lengthy. There's at least 2 documents that were unsealed now, and so there's a lot of work that has to be done. So it's kind of too early to be saying, it's a one and done. There's a lot of work that has to be done. It's like any other investigation.
I know that in the press conference, correct me if I'm wrong, you had said that there was no indication, or the FBI had indicated to you that no officer who's active with the Guam Police Department is being investigated?
Well, the statement is this. I've had a chance to speak to both the senior special resident agent in charge and the special agent in charge. The Guam office falls under the Honolulu field office. And so the special agent in charge from the Honolulu office was here in Guam this week, along with the senior resident agent. And this is the second conversation I had, and they assured me that in relation to those documents that were unsealed, and in relation to those documents and the names of the officers that were named in those documents, whose names appeared in those documents, they are not a part of, or were they a part of, any criminal or corrupt investigation. That does not include, though, the 2 retired officers. Right. That's a separate thing. That's still something that the feds are looking into.
Right.
That's their investigation.
And that being said, because I did have the opportunity to, and I think we all did, review the documents, there was something in there from an FBI agent who believed that an officer is still active with the Guam Police Department may have been providing sensitive information to an officer who's no longer active. Were you able to vet that information, or is that part of the investigation?
That's part of what we're looking into. Okay. But again, yeah, you're right. There's a mention there, but I think that matter was clarified through the FBI's investigation. That's why they allowed me, or we had the conversation where, yes, you can say this, and that's what I'm allowed to say based on their investigation. Other than the 2, all the other officers are not a part of, or were they a part of, that criminal investigation.
I know that in the past we've spoken a lot about these kind of like after the fact, these unsealed court documents or revelations that come out that prompt investigations
Right.
that are conducted by Internal Affairs, but are there any efforts to root out alleged police corruption that are more preemptive and proactive?
Yeah, and people, always have that opportunity to call the Guam Police Department. And I'll tell you, we investigate things, whether it's a letter, a tip, sometime anonymously. If there's any allegation against a police officer for any wrongdoing or criminal misconduct or corruption, we not only have a duty to investigate, but we have a lawful obligation to do that investigation. It's in our enabling statute.
Thank you, Chief. And earlier, when I asked you to address the people of Guam, and you had said that the Guam Police Department is here and that they can call GPD.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know I spoke to you maybe last month about, there was a few stories in the media about people who had filed cases with the Guam Police Department and they hadn't heard back, or people who have called and then they didn't get a response. Are there efforts underway to address those types of instances? Are those few and far between? Are they the exception or the norm?
Yeah, I think there are exceptions. We get calls every day, and like I said earlier in my presentation, we prioritize the calls, and so sometimes the calls fall through and they don't get any follow-up. But Major Joe, the majors here, we all make ourselves available to the community. I make my office available. If you're not happy, please give me a call. And we'll figure it out. And that's one of the things I do as a chief on a daily basis. Same with my majors. If you're not happy, it didn't work out the way you wanted to, we stay connected to the community. I mean, even with our personal devices, we stay connected to the community, the neighborhood watch groups. I'm an active member of probably 6 neighborhood watch groups. And there's something that pops up there. I'll call the precinct and say, hey, look, I saw this on the Machechi neighborhood watch group. Can you send an officer? And sometimes the neighbor watch group people, they message me directly, hey, Chief, I've been waiting for an officer for 2 hours. I call Major Joe and says, hey, look, can you just find out when they can get there? So we may not be as responsive all the time, but there'll always be a response. And, again, we go back to we can do more if we have more.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
How important have the neighborhood watches, and then also, with this increase in crime that we've seen over the years, it seems like the people of Guam are just trying to do more to fill in the gaps that are being created by, the staffing shortages just across the board with law enforcement. And when I say fill in the gaps, I mean the formation of, every village some of them have more than one neighborhood watch group, right? Nowadays, everybody has security cameras.
Right.
And so we do see from the media that, sometimes security footage really plays a part in helping solve crime, sometimes neighborhood watches. So have those kind of ways the community steps up, have those been, a good assistance for the Guam Police Department?
Yes. So if you look back at how policing works now, that's why we have what's called the community-oriented policing strategies.
Right.
That's the COPS grant. And because what it is now is that, it's more community-oriented, hence the name, community-oriented policing strategies. Because it's not just anymore the job of the police to keep the community safe, but it's the job of the police to work with the community. And that's, these neighborhood watch groups, these chats that we have, help us to connect with the community. We have the Community Crimes Task Force. Their job is to go out and connect with the mayors. These retirees, they're going out and connecting with the mayors on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. What is it that we can do to better serve you? We did the press conference earlier today about the homeless encampment. That's the issues that Mayor Savares has been dealing with for many years. Before they talked about that encampment, I'll tell you right now, our Community Crimes Task Force and our patrol officers have moved and removed homeless individuals, But there's only so much we can do. And the mayor's right. I called the police and they asked me, well, Mayor, what do you want me to do? Because the only thing I can do as a police is tell people you're trespassing on private property, you have to move on. But I am not a social service provider, so I can't get them WIC, I cannot get them food stamp or welfare, whatever. My job is just to enforce the law.
Right. Yeah. So what I thought when I saw that press conference where you guys are now going to be assisting with the homeless encampments is, all we heard today was how you're stretched so thin and it's very difficult for you guys to respond in all these different areas. So again, what I saw was just one more thing on your list of things to do. So how is that effort, being part of that task force and going out and, I mean, Lord knows the homeless are all over the place. So is that going to really take away from your ability to police?
No,
the general public?
I think the General Moylan made it clear. This is just a pilot approach now to see how we can do a whole of government approach so that it's not just the Guam Police Department chasing people. You know, the intent is to bring them in and tell them what government services are out there, whether it's treatment, prevention, substance abuse, help with getting maybe, you know, some financial aid from the government. So it's not just go in there and kick them out. You know, it's bringing them somewhere and, you know, seeing if they qualify for residential housing or something in the homeless shelters.
Yeah, I know that our colleagues here in the body, we've been racking our brains trying to figure out solutions to homelessness. I mean, looking at everything from vagrancy laws to, I mean, now I think there was a bill that's being introduced to outlaw panhandling at the intersection. So wish you luck on that. Body cams, I know you had a little bit about body cams.
Yes, so we have $200,000. It's a federal match grant. It's $100,000 from the federal government, $100,000 from Guam, GPD. And so we're in the process of doing procurement for body cams.
And then, so which officers would be using the body cams? And then,
Depending on where how much we get, how much we can buy. And you know, body cams are not that expensive. It's what the collateral equipment that you need. Are you going to store it in a cloud? Are you going to store it in a server? You know, those things become expensive. How long are you going to store it? You know, is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? And, you know, that's the collateral equipment that's going to cost money. So, of course, the priority would be patrol because that's where a lot of the interaction comes first, the first contact with the public.
outside of the one case that we're all familiar with, where body cam footage played a major part in the trial and everything, is there a reason there's been a delay in the implementation of body cam usage, or would you say there's been a delay for the police department?
We've never had the funding. This is the first time in my recollection where we've been awarded a grant for body-worn cams.
And how do the rank and file officers feel about using body cams?
We'll see. Yeah.
And then I did want to close, Chief. There was some news, and I know it's not on the agenda. There was some news today, and there's kind of been news. As you know, I also chair the committee on, well, this committee also has oversight of education, and I believe there's been 3 threats to the schools, to include, was a gun discovered at Southern High today?
No, there was a report of a student carrying a gun. There was no gun recovered. However, all 3 cases that you're talking about, all of the minors have been taken into custody for either terrorizing or terroristic conduct.
Right, and so, I mean, again, you're stretched so thin, and we did have the SRO program, and I think the marshals were at the schools, but that's done with, and I think now we have 3 SROs district-wide, from what I understand, and they're mostly acting as truant officers.
Right. I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So have you guys been approached at all, or can you maybe just explain how the Guam Police Department's involved in school safety?
We were going down that road, and for some reason, DOE just stopped engaging us as far as having police officers as SROs in the schools.
Right.
It's a conversation to be had with the DOE.
I mean,
I'm not sure what happened to their program. Well, we submitted, we actually put together a application because that was a federally funded program, the SRO program that was housed at the judiciary. Unfortunately, the conversation fell through. Mr. Fernandez is gone. You know, we've been going through changes in leadership over there. So, yeah, it's a conversation we'll have with them at any time.
Well, we could just have it now. Is it realistic to expect that the Guam
Well,
Police
I think
Department
in most jurisdictions, usually it's either retired police officers or sheriffs that run the SRO program. Yeah, so they come in from the outside, and you know, we stand ready to, you know, I mean, if there's funding associated, you know, I told him back then, you know, if there's funding for an SRO, we hire the police officer, train them, and because you're funding it, it'll be signed directly to you.
So do you think that if this situation became more of a possibility, that we would end up using some retired officers?
Yeah, there could be retired officers. There's civilian, they're reserve officers. You know, or, you know, could make themselves available. You know, especially, you know, if they have a full-time job. Yeah, something to consider.
Nice, because Pete Wolford keeps coming up to see me, so I don't know. I'll give him a heads up, Chief. We wanted to have this roundtable hearing again. Like I said, new term, new committee, and I know that we're struggling out here, right? Like I said, the people of Guam feel like they're under siege, and you guys are really trying to make the most with the little that you do have. But this committee and this body, we remain committed to getting you what you need. If the Guam Police Department officers were accidentally included in that 22% raise to maybe bump you guys up a little more, would you be mad?
No?
Okay. And then Chief Perez, I know that I committed you guys the retention pay. I don't want to say too much, but we are working on a measure that would, give you guys that 18% retention pay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. And so, again, I don't know, Monica, Nellie, Anne-Marie, Grace, did you want to just say anything on the record before we let you go? Are you good, ready for happy hour? Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to reiterate what the chief mentioned before about the 22%.
Right.
If you read the write-up that Edward Byrne wrote, he basically tells us that line agency professionals are 61% less in salaries being earned compared to our counterparts in the autonomous agencies. And yes, it may or may not be a bad time to give an increment, but I definitely support it because I've had opportunities to move to another entity just for the sake of an increase. But apparently I love blue, and I'm still here, and it would be great. Again, we have law enforcement dispatchers who make $11 an hour starting, who are leaving us for $20 an hour. And if we don't want to be as bad as our counterparts with the law enforcement officers in the sense of not having personnel, we need to start giving them a reason to stay. And that increment being proposed is a definite plus on that part.
Right, and I think that let's just be realistic here, right? The conversation so much is about the cost of living, but when you're paying government employees wages that were competitive 10 to 15 years ago, it's kind of okay, maybe that's why we're struggling with the cost of living. With that being said, I think that the news that came out yesterday about the governor possibly initiating another program similar to the LEAP program, I think that's going to make the 22% general pay plan raises a little more politically tasteful for some of my colleagues who might be reluctant to do that, because the thinking is that we're taking care of the government employees and we're leaving the private sector behind. But if there's some kind of program to assist the private sector, again, I think most of my colleagues would kind of be okay with that. I'm not going to speak for anybody, but I know the general pay plan, these are, in my opinion, the hardest working people and among the lowest paid in the government of Guam. So I commit to supporting that 22% raise for you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Of course. Chief, anything in closing?
Yes, sir. First, I'd like to thank the entire committee for allowing the Guam Police Department to come here and testify before this committee. I hope that the information we provided today is useful and is information that you can help with the Guam Police Department moving some initiatives forward. But most importantly, sir, let me close with this. There are a bunch of hardworking men and women in the Guam Police Department that wear this uniform every day with pride. And so that's why I take offense when people paint a broad brush that the Guam Police Department is corrupt. We are not corrupt. We're good, hardworking officers for this community. Thank you.
Amen, Chief. Totally agree. And again, thank you, Majors and civilian staff, Captain Tim, and everybody for coming out for this roundtable hearing. I like what Senator Brown said, maybe quarterly. Right, we'll keep the dialogue going, but I don't like to take you away from all the work that you have to do, so you just let me know when it works for you, Chief. And we're going to unpack this roundtable hearing and figure out how we can assist legislatively. That's my commitment to the men and women in blue and also the civilian staff that make public safety as critical as it is. If there are no further questions or comments, and this concludes the roundtable hearing, the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts will continue to accept written statements on today's hearing within 10 business days from today, which may be mailed to my office on the second floor of the Guam Congress Building at 163 Chalan Santo Papa in Agatna. You may also send your statements to us at malafunction@guamlegislature.org. That's MALAFUNKSHUN at guamlegislature.org. Thank you all for your participation. This public roundtable hearing is adjourned at 5:33, Biba Betness, adios.